Good evening, everyone. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll? Here.
Is online tonight. Councilmember Tala. Here. Councilmember Schlegel.
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Honzak.
Here.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Wonderful. Well, good evening, everyone.
Here too.
City Clerk just noted Councilmember Landman will be joining us virtually, and I just want to confirm that she is on the line. Wonderful. So tonight's meeting, we have a number of things on the agenda. We have two proclamations this evening. The first is a proclamation of June as Pride Month. The second is a proclamation of Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week, which is June the 7th through the 15th. We have two, I'm just going to quadruple check that we do have two presentations this evening. Yes. The first is the Maple Avenue connectivity presentation. The second is the Community Quality of Life Grant recommendations. We will then have a voting session this evening. The first is the second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Chapter 6.08, rental housing licenses and owner-occupied group house registrations, followed by a first reading ordinance approving FY26 Budget Amendment Number 4. We'll then have a consent agenda. The first item is the single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a service and equipment contract with Axon. Single reading ordinance authorizing renewal of contract for engineering services with Rummel, Clapper, and Call. A single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for architectural and contract administration services with Bignell, Watkins, and Hasser. And a resolution authorizing submission of the FY26 State Revitalization Grant Program applications. As a reminder, for my colleagues, the consent agenda we will vote on as a group unless there is a motion to remove an item and vote on it separately. Lastly, this evening, we will have a work session. It will be the rent stabilization policy review, scope of work. In terms of upcoming meetings, on Saturday, June the 15th is Father's Day. On Sunday, June the 18th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have a presentation on the Purple Line Connector Grant, which is formerly known as the New Ave Bikeway Project presentation. We will also have three voting items. The first is the second reading ordinance approving FY25 Budget Amendment Number 4. Single reading ordinance approving Community Quality of Life Grant recommendations. Single reading ordinance awarding a grant for summer lunch and learn services. And then we will have a work session on a contract for the library's solar panels, as well as the ASME Council Relations Overview session. On Thursday, June the 19th is Juneteenth. City offices and facilities are closed for the Juneteenth holiday. On Sunday, June the 22nd through Wednesday, June the 25th is the Maryland Municipal League Summer Conference in Ocean City. And as a result of that conference, many of us will be in attendance. The City Council will not meet. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, July the 2nd. Our regular meeting will start at 7:30. We will have a presentation, the Library and Community Center project update. And then we will have a voting session, a single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for library solar panels. And as a reminder, Friday, July the 4th is Independence Day. City offices and facilities are closed for the Independence Day holiday. And so with that, we will begin with our proclamations for tonight. The first is the LGBTQ plus Pride Month of June 2025. Whereas the city of Tacoma Park recognizes and celebrates the diversity, resilience, and contributions of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning LGBTQ plus community, and whereas LGBTQ plus Pride Month is celebrated each year in June to honor the 1965 Stonewall Uprising in New York City, a pivotal event that ignited the modern movement for LGBTQ plus rights and equality in the United States. And whereas the first Pride March in New York City was held on June the 28th, 1970, on the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. And whereas Pride Month is a time to recognize and celebrate the impact of LGBTQ plus individuals locally, nationally, and internationally. And whereas this month-long celebration also offers an opportunity to reflect on the progress made, acknowledge the challenges that remain, and commit to fostering an environment that is inclusive, safe, and supportive for all members of the LGBTQ plus community. And whereas the nation is facing heightened challenges to LGBTQ plus rights, including the introduction of more laws that target transgender healthcare, limit LGBTQ plus content in schools, and restrict gender affirming care, making local protections and affirmations increasingly essential. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park is a welcoming city where LGBTQ plus residents can live freely without fear of prejudice or discrimination. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of racial, ethnic, cultural, gender, and sexual identities of its residents. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, on behalf of the council, residents, and staff, proclaim June 2025 as LGBTQ plus Pride Month. The next item is proclamation of Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week, which is June the 7th through the 15th. Whereas the Chesapeake Bay is the largest and most productive estuary in the United States and its watershed spanning 6 states and the District of Columbia. And whereas the Chesapeake Bay watershed covering 64,000 square miles is an extraordinary and vital natural resource with some of the nation's most productive farm and forest lands. And whereas the Chesapeake Bay is fed by 50 major tributaries, including the Susquehanna, Potomac, Rappahannock, York, and James Rivers, and stretches 200 miles from the Havre de Grace, Maryland, to Norfolk, Virginia. And whereas the Chesapeake Bay watershed is home to more than 18 million people, many of whom rely on the watershed's natural resources for their livelihood and recreational activities. And whereas an important source of food for Maryland and the East Coast of the United States, the Chesapeake Bay produces more than 500 million pounds of seafood harvest each year. And whereas the more than 83,000 farms in the Chesapeake Bay watershed contribute more than $10 billion in added contributions to the economy in the region and provide food to millions of Americans. And whereas the Chesapeake Bay tributaries are an important source of drinking water, which is essential for public health and a vital resource for future generations. And whereas the rich history, pivotal economic importance, and astounding beauty of the Chesapeake Bay watershed never cease to amaze residents and visitors alike. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park is in Anacostia watershed, which is important to the character and quality of the community and ultimately the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And whereas the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments has recognized the importance of Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week and has encouraged its members to do the same. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, do hereby proclaim June 7th through the 15th, 2025 as Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week in Tacoma Park and urge all residents to recognize the importance of this observance and to participate in events, activities, and educational programs designed to increase awareness of the importance of the Chesapeake Bay watershed in our community. Right, and so with that, we will move to public comments this evening. In terms of public comments, first we will ask for public comment on voting items. As a reminder, the voting items for this evening is the second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Chapter 6.08, rental housing licenses and owner occupied house registrations, first reading ordinance approving the FY26 budget amendment number 4, and the consent agenda that consists of the single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a service and equipment contract with Axon, single reading ordinance authorizing renewal of contract for engineering services with Rummel, Klepper, and Kahn, single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for architectural and contract administration services with Bignell, Watkins, and Hasser, and a resolution authorizing the submission of the FY26 State Revitalization Grant Program applications. Do we have any comments this evening on voting items?
Gotta do the switch.
Go right ahead.
Jacqueline Moore, Ward 2. I watched with interest Captain Mazzotti's presentation about the bundling of the Axon contracts and the subsequent cost savings associated with the bundling. Both Captain Mazzotti and Chief Duvall are correct. Axon is considered to be the only game in town when it comes to this type of technology. There are other companies, at least 40 by my count, but Axon is the big dog. They supply our military and other federal enforcement agencies such as Customs and Border Protection and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Axon's monopoly is what enables it to provide the price breaks on bundling their services. I've included several links for you to explore in the emailed version of my comments. The American Civil Liberties Union has raised serious questions about Axon's incorporation of artificial intelligence, specifically about how AI can distort incident reports. Think for a minute about how many times you've read an AI summary that was a result of an internet query. Let's be honest, these summaries don't always make sense. AI tools have been shown to reflect biases against people of color. It's a garbage in, garbage out technology. Axon's Draft One tool, which thankfully is not used by our police department, uses OpenAI's GPT-4 large language model. This tool helps officers prepare incident reports. LLMs often generate errors that are also termed hallucinations. The better practice is to have officers first complete reports from memory and then supplement their reports using footage from their body and car cameras. Noting that we have several Tacoma Park residents who are members of the Religious Society of Friends, I found a recent investigation by the American Friends Services Committee. They raised serious questions about how Axon technology has been used. Use of Axon technology doesn't seem to square with the city's March 2024 resolution calling for a bilateral ceasefire, hostage release, and humanitarian aid in Gaza. My other issue with Axon starts with the company's origin story, an origin story that's predicated upon a lie. The founder, Rick Smith, someone I consider to be a poster boy for toxic masculinity, says he started his company, then called Taser International, in response to the murder of 2 of his high school football team buddies. Turns out that Smith was not friends with the 2 young men who were killed. The families of these 2 young men are not enthused by Smith's use of their tragedies to market his business. Again, see the link to the article titled Taser Maker Axon has a moving backstory. It's mostly a myth. The workplace culture at Axon is also rather scary. Employees show loyalty to the company by allowing themselves to be tased in front of their peers at company meetings and events. Again, I've got another article for you. There were scouts in attendance at last week's council meeting. I'm concerned that some of our elected officials did not know what questions to ask regarding the bundling of the Axon contracts. One council member said she was totally naive when it comes to police technology. So what do I want? I want all of you on the dais to take the time to learn more about Axon and the alternatives to Axon, so when it comes time to put together another contract and to vote on the contract, a more informed decision can be made. I'm very grateful that the Tacoma Park Police don't employ the cowboy tactics and display the stupid antics of people at Axon. At the same time, I would not be sad at all if a better company, one that more closely aligns with our city's ethics and morals, can be selected when it's time to enter into a new contract.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items? Do we have any virtual comments on voting items? Okay. Do we have any general public comments this evening? General public comments?
Excuse me. Hi, my name is Saul Schneiderman. I live at 306 Lincoln Avenue. And before moving into my house in 1988, I lived in 3 one-bedroom apartments in Tacoma Park. I believe that tenants have the right to a decent, affordable home and that landlords deserve a fair return on their investment. On June 2nd, I sent the mayor and council a letter about my experiences lobbying for legislation in Annapolis, which would authorize Maryland counties to adopt good cause eviction provisions. That bill passed the House in 2024, but failed to move out of the Senate committee this past spring. I hope you will read my letter and the attachments to it. Now, I'm a former AFSCME union president at the Library of Congress. I'm now retired. One of our leaders in AFSCME was Bill Lucey. He was the man who made up the quote, "I am a man," during the 1968 sanitation workers' strike, and he was a bit of a sage in our union. He said this: "Those that make history seldom see the footprints that they leave behind because the path is always before them." Now, before tonight's meeting, I read Mr. McNally's scope of work review regarding rent stabilization, and it does look like you're going to be taking a serious look at the affordable housing footprints that for over 4 decades have had a positive impact on the city of Tacoma Park. The steady and stable tenant-landlord relationships that have been established here have been a blessing to our community. With the cooperation of landlords, thousands of low and moderate income renters in our city have been able to stay in their apartments longer, raise families, and go to work each morning without worrying about the wolf at the door. They have not been so rent burdened so as to be priced out of their homes. Now, this kind of stability doesn't make the headlines, but it is a welcome news, especially in today's world so fraught with anxiety. So let us celebrate Tacoma Park's housing accomplishments. Our law is the oldest continuously still in effect rent stabilization law in Maryland. But it's not just the law, it's the rent stabilization program that is being administered by our city staff. For over 40 years, our city has been a lighthouse for affordable housing in Maryland, and you, our elected representatives, are the lighthouse keepers. Hooray for Tacoma Park's affordable housing.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments?
Hooray. Hello, good evening. Chantal Warzala. I live on the 7100 block of Maple Avenue in Ward 1 and wanted to provide some comments on the Maple Avenue connectivity project. And I am really only concerned about the plan between Philadelphia and Carroll, which those of us who live there call Upper Maple. And my recommendation is that the city not pursue the project on that section of Maple and leave that section of Maple as is. The city has already invested in making Cedar Avenue the designated bike route for this section of the city with signage and sharrows. Cedar Avenue is definitely the safer and more appropriate bike route. Why is that? There's much less traffic, there's less steep hill, fewer parked cars, a more direct connection to the Metropolitan Branch Trail, and most importantly, it is not a bus route. Presumably, these are the factors that led the city to designate Cedar Avenue as our bike route. In addition, the EYA development at the Metro has been approved and will be creating a mixed-use path that connects the Metropolitan Branch Trail to Tacoma. It also includes bike storage for transit users, and importantly, this path for bikes will utilize a new connection to Metro off of Cedar Street Northwest. So directly from Cedar Avenue in Tacoma Park to the Metro without having to deal with Carroll Avenue. So it's a much safer way for bikelists to get to Metro. So why not Maple? First off, we have a lot of traffic on Maple Avenue, and it has increased due to city action. I think we all like the streetery, but in creating the streetery on Laurel, traffic can no longer turn right from Eastern Avenue to Laurel. Maple Avenue is the next place to turn right, and we have definitely seen an increase in traffic that way, as well as from the developments. Maple is a bus route, and we want to prioritize bus transit to Metro. The corner of Maple and Tulip is home to a very valued church and community resource that has no parking lot. So parking in that intersection as a complete premium at drop-off, pickup, church events, AA meetings, NA meetings, Scout meetings, highly utilized, valuable community resource. So for all of those reasons, I would suggest that you keep Cedar Avenue as our designated bike route and refrain from changing Maple Avenue. In my last 3 seconds, I will also say that we would be very disappointed if the 4th of July parade needed to be rerouted off of Maple Avenue due to construction of bump outs to facilitate this vision, which it is my understanding that the 4th of July parade would have to be rerouted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Tess Harrington, and I am here representing Educare Support Services, the nonprofit organization that manages the Tacoma Langley Park One Stop Center, proudly serving the Tacoma Park community and surrounding areas since 2010. First, we want to express our sincere gratitude for your ongoing support and for continuing to allocate funding to community organizations, especially during this time of budget constraints. Your investments help us meet urgent needs and ensures that critical services remain accessible to the most vulnerable members of our community. Thanks to your support, Educare has provided services to thousands of residents each year, including monthly food assistance to over 350 households, including home deliveries for seniors and individuals with disabilities, workforce development programs that help immigrants, youth, and returning citizens gain employment and stability, behavioral health services, including psychiatric rehabilitation and case management, as well as culturally relevant outreach and support for African, Caribbean, and Latino community members in the Tacoma Langley Park area. The Tacoma Langley Park One Stop Center is a vital community hub. Whether it's addressing food insecurity, housing instability, or mental health needs, we provide support with dignity, compassion, and respect. Every dollar you invest enables us to do more, reach further, and help more people regain hope and stability. Your commitment to equity and inclusive services strengthens our entire community. On behalf of Educare's staff, volunteers, and the many residents we serve, thank you. We are proud to partner with the City of Tacoma Park and look forward to continuing our shared mission of making this city a place where we all can thrive. Thank you for your time, your trust, and your continued support.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
May I speak now about the rent stabilization issue you guys are going to talk about?
You can.
Good. Thank you all very much. Do I need to identify myself for anybody?
For the audience,
For the-
County
Mark Elridge.
Executive Mark Elridge,
County Executive.
also
Thank you.
resident of Ward 5.
Yes. So I want to talk about a little bit about the rent stabilization ordinance really quickly tonight. First of all, I was on the council. I was in the council. We made major revisions to the rent stabilization ordinance somewhere around 2000. And it made the ordinance a lot better, and it made the ordinance legally defensible, which was a problem that we had with the previous ordinance. One of the things we did is we created multiple pathways to rent increases above the rent guidelines. And despite the propaganda that's out there about you have these hard caps in Tacoma Park, and now they're saying Montgomery County does too, you do not have hard caps. You have a pretty simple system. And while people may say it's complicated, if you're doing your taxes, you're a landlord, whether you're small or big, you got all the information you need to file a request for higher rents. And basically the law says that if you're not making the return that you previously made, or if you're not making the industry standard of net operating income, you can reset the rents to either of those things. In other words, you're not limited to what you had the previous year. If your expenses are higher, you can get a rent increase above the guidelines. So there's nothing rigid about the system you have. The second thing is that on capital improvements, landlords can come in and they can get rent increases for extraordinary capital improvements that are also not limited by the rent guidelines. As adamant as the proponent I am of rent stabilization, I had to agree with 17% rent increases that were being granted in my time on the council when the amount of repairs in a building justified rent increases above the rent guidelines. So they obviously, if I could put up with it, they do allow larger increases for people who need the larger increases. I want to say something about vacancy decontrol. The council I was on made a very crucial decision. We were deciding, do I protect the units or I protect the people? If you protect the people, you do vacancy decontrol. If you were concerned about making sure the units stayed in the inventory of affordable units, you don't do vacancy decontrol. When you couple vacancy decontrol with the ability of landlords to do, what do they call, just evict somebody without cause, as one of the former speakers spoke about, it is really easy for a person to vacate their building and turn over their entire tenancy over a period of a year or two, and then use vacancy control, decontrol to bring things to the market. So you're not going to be able to protect people if you get rid of vacancy decontrol. The council I was on had 2 studies done on the efficacy of rent control. One was done to compare maintenance in Tacoma Park with maintenance in surrounding jurisdictions. That study concluded the Tacoma Park properties of a similar quality were better maintained in the city of Tacoma Park than they were in surrounding jurisdictions, including Montgomery County. And I venture to say that's probably still true today. I live on one side of Flower Avenue. I'm pretty sure that things on the other side of Flower Avenue are not as good as they are on the Tacoma Park side. In general, the county also did a study because we were looking at where you could live in Montgomery County because we're very concerned about affordability. Tacoma Park is the only place in Montgomery County where people of every income can live. That is not true in any other place in Montgomery County. That is not an insignificant distinction for the city. To be a place where anybody can find a home is really important. So when I look at your proposal, I look at it as ways of finding ways to not have rent stabilization or not have the kind of law you have today. And if you're looking for effectiveness or what it serves, you got to ask yourself, who are you serving? Are you serving the landlords? Then obviously rent stabilization's not their cup of tea. It limits their profitability. First to admit that. But it doesn't keep them from being profitable. It just means you can't gouge people and you can't raise prices to the market. But in terms of the people who live here, rent stabilization is a resounding success for people in this community. I taught at Rolling Terrace Elementary School. One of the distinctions about the Tacoma Park community over the other schools that fed Rolling Terrace was the lesser levels of mobility because a person could put down roots in Tacoma Park and can stay here. I know you're all concerned about the long-term stability of your community. When you have a transient tenant population that does not have roots in the community, they don't invest in the community. They don't invest their energy. If I think I'm going to get kicked out and have to move next year, I'm not joining a civic association. I'm not joining a PTA. When parents believe they're going to be there year after year, and they want a strong community because they want their kids raised in a nice place, and they feel they've got the power to affect that, then rent stabilization helps give people a reason to say, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to participate in the community, and I'm going to fight for it. I know this because I've had conversations with tenants in my neighborhood when I was on the council. I remember asking them one day, what would happen if you owned your property? Because I said, none of you ever come to me about crime, none of you come to me about drugs, none of you come to me about schools, none of you come to me about anything because you don't feel vested here. You're afraid. You had some particularly bad landlords in Ward 5. I said, if you own this building, what would you do? Well, I'm a taxpayer. If I own the building, I'm going to come to you. You want your residents to feel as much like taxpayers as you can. So I'm asking you to think really hard about what you ask for in a study and try to be aware of the biases of what you're going to see when you get that study back. There are no best practices for this. They're either you maximize your protection of tenants and the ability of people to stay here, or you maximize landlord incomes. I mean, the city's always chosen the former, not the latter. I hope that you'll stay consistent with what we tried to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Randy Gibson, Ward 3. Hi, everybody, greetings. My comments today are about the upcoming rent stabilization review. It's hard to follow Mark's pitch and his story and his compelling argument, but I'll continue. First, I want to recommend an excellent book by a visionary hometown architect, Carl Elefanti. Going for Zero, Decarbonizing the Built Environment on the Path to Our Urban Future. It's a great book. In many ways, this book is about stewardship. Stewardship of buildings, the climate, and our social fabric. Carl provides imperatives on each. I quote, as the negative consequences of unfettered and inequitable development became inescapable, the concept of sustainable development emerged, acknowledging the inseparability of social, economic, and environmental factors, unquote. I challenge the council to review our highly successful rent stabilization policies with a similar integrated stewardship perspective. Its scope of work must, I believe, start by celebrating our relatively stable, diverse, and affordable renter community. Referring to zoning and master plans, Carl Elefante writes, completed master plans sit on a shelf until private actors determine that their interests are not overtly encumbered by the public interests allegedly expressed in the plan. Public interests are so far down the menu that they are the after-dinner mints in conventional development. Love it, unquote. We must do better in the forthcoming rent stabilization review by making sure the public interests and values are front and center. The stewardship imperative, along with robust community engagement, can provide the value-based framework needed. By the way, stewardship is defined as the careful and responsible management of something entrusted into one's care. I submit that the value felt most keenly by this community and one you are entrusted with is protecting and caring for our diverse tenant population. Policy improvements may be identified, but our current rent stabilization policies must not be weakened at the expense of current renters. Finding yet more development incentives as a goal is highly questionable. Please clarify your values and goals as you identify the scope of work. 2 suggestions to encourage more meaningful public debate. Give plenty of notice for public hearings and both transcribe and post them promptly on the SETI website. You can use the A1 or 1A that like you have up there. 2, hold council work sessions early in the evenings so residents will more likely stay and listen to the relevant discussions. Lastly, council, you may want to consider relevance of a motion passed in October of last year, a motion approved to request city staff to draft an amendment to the landlord-tenant ordinance regarding tenant protections, which would include displacement as well as aspects of quality of life amenities within the buildings. This amendment that I believe is not yet drafted seems relevant to the current discussion.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Jackie Moore again. My comments tonight are mostly about ways to increase parking for Piney Branch Elementary School staff. I'd like the city to reserve the street parking along Maple Avenue between Philadelphia and Lee for Piney Branch staff members between the hours of 7:30 and 4:30. Montgomery County Public Schools provides staff parking stickers for many of its schools, so the city would not have to provide funds to create stickers. There aren't many professionals who carry as much stuff to and from their workplace as elementary school teachers. The lot at the school doesn't have enough spaces to accommodate all staff, and it's especially hard for itinerant staff, people who work at more than one school, to find a spot if their time at Piney Branch is scheduled for later in the morning or in the afternoon. A few examples of itinerant staff members include speech pathologists, pupil personnel workers, instrumental music teachers, and psychologists. Schools throughout Washington, D.C. limit the parking in front of and on nearby streets to use by staff only during school hours. New York City public schools also employ this approach. It's not a new idea. Designating these street parking spaces on Maple for Piney Branch staff would mean that signs reserving some of these spaces for City of Tacoma Park employees would be eliminated. Now that the library rebuild project is nearing completion, there are plenty of parking spaces available behind the library for city staff. When I passed by the library this afternoon, there were easily 20 or more empty spaces, and this was around 1 o'clock. Another option would be for the city to work with MCPS and Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission to help arrange use of spaces on park-owned land that members of city staff use during the library rebuild. My proposed parking restrictions on Maple could exclude the month of July and federal holidays and weekends, of course, because school's not in session. The city would have to create and install signs with the parking restrictions, but it's my understanding that the city fabricates its own signs. Therefore, the cost would not be astronomical. As the Piney Branch renovation feasibility study process moves forward, I hope that the city's plans for the Maple Avenue connectivity project doesn't destroy the possibility for a redesign of the Piney Branch School and parking lot that would increase parking and allow for the retention of the Piney Branch pool in the final design choice. But when I looked at slide 23, the connectivity project, it eliminates parking in front of Piney Branch. This is no way to treat hardworking teachers. Last but not least, I want to know when the second MPIA request made by Mr. Tom Gagliardo regarding the Keola Cooper case will be released. The request includes the recordings of the interviews of Ms. Cooper by Tacoma Park Police Department staff. It's important to get this information. Residents need a clearer picture of what led to the city's insurance company and the city's lawyer deciding to settle with Ms. Cooper. I'd also like a progress report about the state of the audit. Has a firm been chosen? I know you had your closed meeting administrative session last week. So has a firm been chosen? When will the audit begin? How long is it expected to take once the audit's complete? How long is it expected to take for the results to be made public? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Okay. Do we have any virtual? Come on down.
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. I see that the agenda item for the rent stabilization talks about the council receiving a presentation and providing feedback. The council and the mayor are responsible for conducting a policy review for such a major law as the rent stabilization law. I urge you not to abdicate your responsibility to the city manager and the city staff, but to own it and to direct the show from tonight on. And that means having a public discussion of what your goals are in this review of rent stabilization and what you think the scope of the study should be. And then the staff can work from there. But this seems like it's rushing forward with the staff kind of taking, the heat off your back and telling you how this is going to go. Secondly, I see there's a lot of focus on best practices. Of course, as the county executive said, that's a controversial subject, and there is no consensus about best practices, so very interesting how that's going to happen. But I would suggest for the consultant a best practice model for them to pay attention to, and we could call it the Maple Avenue model. It's from a small city we're all very familiar with, the same size as ours, right outside Washington, D.C., and the chief of Down County Planning for Montgomery County, Elza Heisel McCoy, who probably a lot of folks know, he is a Tacoma Park resident, he told the planning board in 2023 that Maple Avenue is a unique, affordable housing resource that other parts of Down County are clamoring to get. A unique, affordable housing resource that other parts of the Down County, Montgomery County are clamoring to get. I would suggest you make sure the consultant pays attention to this best practice model. Thank you, that'd be wonderful. Also, in terms of, we do know even before we do this review, we know what the outstanding issue is in terms of making sure our rent stabilization continues to work and continues to protect people. And that is to help landlords afford the maintenance and upgrades that they need to do in their buildings. That seems to be on the bottom of the agenda in terms of like tax credits. And we have a whole housing reserve that's been building up over years that I don't believe the council has ever come up with a plan for what it's going to do with that housing reserve. I would suggest you now seriously begin tapping into that fund as a way of helping landlords repair and renovate, upgrade their buildings, and yes, be able to make a fair return while still not putting anybody out of their housing. Lastly, it's really sad that you would choose to do this at a time when so many immigrant and low-income residents are under such stress.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comment?
Hi, I'm here to talk about the quality of life grant recommendations. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the City Council. My name is Wendy Kent. I'm from Ward 2, and I'm president of Tommy's Pantry. I'd like to thank the Grants Committee for recommending funding to Tommy's Pantry's grant request for $7,500 to help support the purchase of 325 fresh produce boxes monthly for our participants. I'm here to tell you a little more about us, our grant request, and the current climate at Tommy's Pantry, and answer any questions you may have. Tommy's Pantry primarily serves people from our community who are lower income, people of color, and immigrants, families who have seen cuts to their SNAP income, families who are frightened in the current political climate. I've lived in Tacoma Park for over 20 years. We raised our daughter here and sent her through the local school system. I can speak to the values of Tacoma Park. Taking care of our neighbors when they need us is a value the community cherishes. As you know, we do not ask questions of families who come to our pantry to receive a food box. That said, we started this pantry at the Tacoma Park Middle School in March of 2020. And I know for fact that the families who come to us then and continue to come to us now are the families who live right here on Maple Avenue, on Flower Avenue, and throughout Tacoma Park. I know that not because we've asked them to prove where they live, but because they're my neighbors. Their children went to school with my daughter. I see them when we enjoy the 4th of July parade or the folk festival. This grant will help fill a gap left by the federal and county funding decreases or complete halt. We lost our fresh produce provided for free from the county through the Capital Area Food Bank back in February and have been scrambling ever since. We finally managed to get an agreement with a local distributor to supply 325 15-pound boxes of produce at $19 a box. That's over $6,000 a month. We're able to use part of our county grant to provide for 187 of the boxes, but Tommy's puts the bill for the difference, $3,250 a month. So this grant means a lot to us. It will afford us 2 months of fresh produce. Fresh produce is the #1 item our participants ask for, and because it's the most nutritionally beneficial food we can give, we will do everything we can to continue to provide it. If we're lucky enough to receive this generous grant, I would encourage you to come see these dollars in action. Please join us at a packing session or distribution. I'd love to show you around our very small but mighty pantry. If you have any questions about the grant, I can answer them, but that may be later. Thank you.
Do we have any other general public comment?
Good evening, council members and mayor and the community members. My name is Gigi. I'm representing Chair. I'm here today to thank you very much for helping our community and also voting and supporting for the Quality of Life Bridge Grant 9,500 from June to July 2026. This allows us to serve our diverse community, the Latinos, African Americans, Ethiopians, Eritreans, and all the immigrants, the newly coming and suffering here because of financial constraints. We also serve and empower the new immigrants. We also help not only low income, no income, those who are coming and challenged because of the American dream. Like I bring this young person who was really challenged during, he came here and then he got my phone. I don't know who gave him, and he called me, Gigi, you are helping people. I said, no, I said, I'm not helping. Okay, let me talk to you. And then after that, I just give him a voucher. And now today, he's going to testify his experience. And we also not only just distributing vouchers, we are integrating our programs with the youth, with the also Maple Tree support groups, and we're also providing different trainings and family wellness training, digital literacy, and then we're helping Mayor Talisha and Carla's life experience, like they know that what we're doing at the grassroots with the people. So what is the impact of this short-term grant? It builds the capacity of immigrants. It also helps to share their experience, help each other. It also helps them to share their challenges their stress. And then when they're coming together, like the Maple Tree support groups, those who were received the vouchers have a training for 12 weeks continuously, and then they were really helping each other. And we celebrated in this center last time. So we also thank the center for helping us. It's really a bridge. It's an equity for us. It's an inclusion and also pride. So today, when I knew that I'm coming here, I called to two of the voucher recipients, and I asked him one word about the voucher, and he said that he helped me in many ways. And I asked him how. And he said that I was going through difficult situations and financial stress. And it was a lifeline for me. And it saved me from hunger. So these young people coming this country for education, for universities, like 2 of them are university students, but when they came here, there is no one, nobody helped them. And then stress, and then, risky things, like so many things. So I invite Surafil to say something.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. And can we give the next speaker 3 minutes?
Well, my name is Sorapel, and I live at 7710 Maple Avenue. So when I received the $70 food voucher at the time, I didn't have any job, and I was struggling to get by. I didn't have much money at all, and buying food was becoming harder each day. I was trying to make whatever I had last, and often eating less to stretch what little I had. So this simple gesture lifted a huge burden off my shoulder that allowed me to focus on other important needs without worrying about my next meal. And more than just a meal, it gave me a sense of relief, and I'm truly grateful for the support. And I'm sure if continued, it will make a real difference in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments? Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments this evening? Okay. Mr. Sherwood, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I was
Wonderful.
just able to unmute. Can I go ahead and speak
Yes, you
now?
can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can speak now.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor and City Council members, my name is Wayne Sherwood and I live in Ward 1. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. I would like to ask a few questions about the Deauville, an apartment complex on Maple Avenue. A few weeks ago, while I was watching the archived video of the City Council meeting, I thought I heard someone say that all of the units at the Deauville have been exempted from the city's rent stabilization laws. I couldn't hear well enough to understand if this is what was really said, and if so, how could that have happened? Therefore, I'm following up with some questions about that. From research done by others, I have heard, and again, I may have misunderstood, that when an owner of an affordable apartment complex in Tacoma Park obtains funding, such as a loan from Montgomery County government, it means that under the city's own rent stabilization law, such a property shall be automatically exempted as a whole from the city's rent stabilization laws. I scanned the web and I saw an ordinance relating to this property was introduced to the City Council by Ira Collard in a proposed ordinance on June 7th, 2024. The wording was very innocuous. The proposed ordinance was titled City of Tacoma Park, Maryland Ordinance 2024, approving use of grant funds to assist with the tenant purchase of 7520 Maple Avenue. Whereas the Deauville Tenant Association have agreed to a sale of the property that would require good faith deposit, blah, 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 the conclusion was, be it ordained by the City Council, Tacoma Park, Maryland, that the city manager or their designee authorizes to provide a good faith deposit not to exceed $55,000 with Eisen and Rome for the, etc., the Deauville Tenant Association. I searched on the web of Montgomery County and Deauville and came up with a page that is titled Montgomery County Quarterly Pipeline Report by the Montgomery County DHCA. It said in the third quarter of 2025, DHCA provided financial investment of $23 million for 13 new projects, including Deauville Apartments, $12,981,811 for the preservation of 83 affordable and 18 rent-stabilized housing units in Tacoma Park. The owner of the property is listed as Deauville Property LLC. I have also heard unofficially that when the county makes a major loan of this size, the city's own rent stabilization law allows the entire property to become exempt from the city's rent stabilization laws. So I would like to ask you the following questions, four questions. One, is it true that the Deauville has become entirely exempt from the city's rent stabilization laws, or might soon become so automatically without any further city action? How does this work? Two, at the time the ordinance was submitted, did the city of Tacoma Park know that the Deauville Property LLC was going to apply for a large loan from the county's HIF? When was that made known to the city council, and in what form? Was it made known to the public, to the residents of the Deauville? Have they been informed about this now? Three, at the time when this ordinance was submitted, did any members of our city government, including the city manager, Roz Grigsby, or Ira Collar, know that if this ordinance was approved, it might very well lead to the property becoming entirely exempt from the city's rent stabilization laws in accordance with the provisions of the city's own rent stabilization laws? And fourth and finally, is it possible that this could also happen in the near future at other properties in the city of Tacoma Park? Are there other properties in the pipeline waiting to repeat this scenario? Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. I look forward to your answers to these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Do we have any other virtual comments this evening? Okay, we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? You just hit your button. Just as a reminder for everybody, you hit your button. I will move you over in order. All right. Council Member Gilbert, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everybody for their comments, all the comments on rent stabilization. County Exec Mark Elrich and Mr. Gibson, former Council Member Gibson, and everyone who made comments on it. Mr. Sherwood, if you're still listening, so I don't lose all my 3 minutes, if you could email me and we can have a conversation about the Deauville offline, and I can explain to you what we knew as a resident. And maybe we can talk offline about that. I know that affordable housing on Maple Avenue has meant a lot to me. I think you all heard me say that plenty of times. And there's so many more of us who've grown up in this community who have had the opportunities we've had, the resources that are here because of it. And unfortunately, we've lost hundreds of affordable housing units over the past few years due to sales and condominiums. So it's of extreme importance to me, like I said last week, that we stabilize that. And I'm hoping that the presentation today gives us information that will help us stabilize what we have in affordable housing, and at the same time, make it a profitable endeavor for our ownership groups so that they can do the maintenance and do the renovations necessary. So I'm hoping that this presentation encompasses all of that and we get the answers we need. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really appreciative to those who came and spoke on food insecurity. I support the grant. I worked with Terry Siemens and Joyce Siemens, former council member Siemens, the other day with the Mana Food delivery. And there are a lot of people out there hungry. And so I'm really in support of that grant. And I'll continue my work with Mana Foods. And hopefully we can continue to give out the resources to those who are in need in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Gilbert. Council Member Honzak.
Thank you, Mayor. There were a lot of speakers tonight, so I won't be able to go through them one by one, but I do want to say a huge thank you. It's nice to see so many faces and hear some really heartfelt thoughts about a number of important issues in our city. Particularly since there was one Ward 5 resident who came forth and he was our county executive. It's not every day we get to see him in here. It's not every day I get to see him as his representative. I am keenly aware that he actually stood in my shoes a number of years ago and is very proud of the rent stabilization work that this city has done and on a personal level. So I just want to express my deep respect for the things that Mark Elrich shared with us tonight. It is not easy to sit in my shoes right now with Mark in this environment. I hope you appreciate that. So with that said, I'm going to say, I want to be clear that I am feeling very confident as we go into the conversation about rent stabilization. As you will see, and I think it's a little bit into the deck on rent stabilization that Director McNally put together, I want to quote something that's in there. It says, "This study will not consider or contemplate any full-scale repeal of rent stabilization. That is not the purpose of the analysis." I hope that is very well heard. And I want to tell you why I believe that statement. Because I myself am one of the council members in Ward 5, right around where Mark lives and where I am very proud that we have a lot of rent stabilized units, who have been personally asked to take a hard look at some of the challenges that particularly some of our small landlords who live in our city face. And I actually helped this group of small landlords come together virtually and start talking to one another so they could discuss some of the specific challenges that they're facing and propose ideas for how they might try to overcome some of those challenges. This can include everything from administrative challenges that they might be facing to, paperwork that they have to submit to get those kinds of 17% increases that County Executive Elrich spoke about. My understanding is that this is not always as easy as Mr. Elrich, Executive Elrich made it sound. I don't have personal experience, but I'm very eager to hear from these landlords about their experiences. And Ms. Cortez, I would like to speak to one of the points that you made because it's really important. You spoke about what's at the top of our agenda, and Mr. Gibson, you talked about making sure there is some motivation to help our buildings be better quality. I couldn't agree with you more. I have been inside and out, as have many of my colleagues up here, as have many of you, to these buildings. The quality is not what any of us would want it to be in many of our buildings. It is not a simple issue to solve. It is not going to be solved solely by looking at this rent stabilization study, but it is one feature that we can try to take a good hard look at and see what could be tweaked, what could be made better. And I hope that people can open their minds to that as we go into this. And I really, really hope that we don't fall down the trough that we did when we were talking about some of the issues on Maple Avenue, where there was a lot of fear mongering. And I'm sorry to call it that, but a lot of my residents were really, really scared. And it's very important that we withhold that kind of judgment right now and listen carefully. Our staff has taken a lot of time to put this study together. They have received input from us. They have answered our detailed questions. Not all of them, many of them are not going to be asked or answered on the dais tonight. There simply isn't that kind of time when we're sitting up here. So please trust that your council members, we have a really diverse array of council members up here, are asking a lot of those tough questions, and they're not all going to be up here tonight. I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm taking a little bit of extra time, but this is such an important issue. And then I want to speak to something that does excite me about one of the creative ways that we motivate our landlords. I had the privilege and honor with cheer to nominate Mr. Shail Singh, a landlord from our Ward 5 area, as the best landlord in town. He did not win the Azalea Award this year, but I have asked if there would maybe someday be a category for the best landlords in town, because it takes a lot of different sticks and carrots to make good things happen. I think we all know that. And I would like to thank, I would particularly like to thank Mr. Sarafel My husband, who was an immigrant himself, had a nice chance to talk to you about your experience as a new immigrant, and he spoke to me about the heartfelt conversations you had, and I know it takes a lot to come up here and speak to us, so thank you for sharing your experiences and helping to promote that opportunity for other new immigrants. I can't think of anything more important in today's world. And as all of us go into this weekend, I do want to wish a happy Father's Day to everybody, but I know that a lot of people are on edge. I know that I am on edge about Saturday. I won't name it. I think we all know. We're going to see and hear a lot of things going on. You're going to make a choice about where you're going to be, but we are all in this together, and I hope that we can really come together as the events continue and as we're all watching other large cities going through protests and feeling sometimes really not well heard. We are here for you. We invite you to come and speak to us. If you need a shoulder to lean on, please come out to the City Council. That's part of what we're here for. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Dabala.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to talk about two things today. The Chesapeake Local Government Advisory Committee meeting, but first I'd like to talk a little bit about the comments that we heard, and thank you all for coming out. And he's not here at the moment, but thank you, Mark Elrich, for taking time to come out here and as a resident and a former council member share your perspective. That was pretty special. Three things. So I'm having a little bit, I'm looking forward to the discussion because I'm hearing the concern that everybody is bringing, and I recognize it. And when I read what I was given, I don't get the same thing out of it that you all do. So we will hopefully be able to get to the bottom of that tonight as we talk about the scope of the work, because as not to repeat what you just heard, that's not the intention to make major changes to rent control that would destabilize our tenants. That's just not what we're trying to do here. I thought Mark's point that we looked at this last in 2007, which is nearly 20 years ago. The world has changed a little bit since then. I would love to see if the city clerk could try to find the 2007 reports. I would really like to see them. That would be very interesting, because there's probably some really good nuggets in there of wisdom. So that's the first thing about rent stabilization. The second thing is along the lines of concerns. There's been a flyer going around. It is identified as from Community Vision, and there are some things on it that troubled me. I will just give you one example. Many units, however, are exempt. So I think you heard Mr. Sherwood refer to the part of our law that exempts deed restricted buildings that are built with the intent of being affordable from the city rent control because they are subject to another form of rent control. And I looked it up at the same source that that was on the Community Vision website, and I learned that 4/5 of the exempted units fall into that category. So that is really a lot of people protected under one system or another. We are focused on the city rules, but I just wanted to make that clear in case people weren't completely clear that most units are covered by ours or some other form of rent control. All right, enough about that. What I had wanted to talk about was the Local Government Advisory Committee meeting for the Chesapeake that I went to. It is Chesapeake Bay Week. So I will just say that the big action is about the future goals of the Bay. So the Chesapeake Bay Agreement amongst the governors and the EPA. Pardon? The Chesapeake Bay Agreement is coming to an end, and it's time to renew the agreement, revise it, adopt new goals. So that's what the meeting was about. And this summer there'll be a whole public comment period. I'll be back telling you when and how and waiving summaries around for you to be able to comment on. Last sentence. The program is moving from focusing on the bay to moving from focusing on water quality to looking at the whole bay, all the watersheds that feed into it. That's a development since it was signed 20 years ago. And looking to the watershed and the land use, and not literally just the bay and the things that pollute the bay itself. So that's the direction they're going in. I think that's a good one, and I just wanted to let everybody know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the comments. There's no possible time to address all of them, but I want to express my strong continuing support for the food insecurity, community building, workforce development, and the other assistance that our quality of life grants will support, and for those who've come out to share the work that their organizations do. Regarding the Maple Avenue connectivity thing we'll be discussing tonight, I do have concerns about the quality of the racial equity analysis that's gone into it at this point, and I'm interested in finding out more about what public input actually was received through this outreach sessions. I can only find one recorded chat. I'm interested in our council discussing what the impacts of bicycle facilities are on residential property values and potentially including that in the scope. In line with Jackie Moore's comment, I too have concerns about Axon, having done some research this week. And I'm sorry to surprise my colleagues, but I will be making a motion to remove this item and vote on it separately. One of the reasons is the need for assurance about the ongoing privacy of data. The company is integrating AI, as we heard. They've been growing 25% or more every year for the last several years. They're a huge force. And I know we're going to be reviewing the task force on sustainable banking and investments recommendations. And so I want to make sure that we have an exit plan should we find that those recommendations have a bearing on our city's relationship with that company. And then regarding rent stabilization, I have reviewed the study's scope of work carefully, and to tie in with the comments we heard from Saul and Mark and Randy and Colleen and others, there again, I want to make sure we have done a robust racial equity analysis with this. As you'll see on the agenda attachment, it's only a very tip of the iceberg listing of statistics at this point. To Councilmember Honzak's point, it does state that the study will not consider or contemplate any full-scale repeal of rent stabilization. I see that as a very limited commitment, obviously, as Tacoma Park could conceivably extend the grace period for new construction to be exempt from rent stabilization, which is currently 5 years, to something much longer, even more than 2 decades. So without doing away with rent stabilization, you could fundamentally change what it is. And I'm concerned about that. The call for comparable jurisdictions, it's something that, it's interesting to look at that kind of information, but we are totally unique, and we brag about our uniqueness as a community, largely in part due to this policy that was adopted 4.5 decades ago. And so ultimately, this is going to be a values choice. I want to make sure that we take responsibility, as Ms. Cordes said, for us as a council, saying this is a values choice. It's not going to come down to data or social science analysis. There's no other place like this, and it's up to us to choose to keep being this place.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Councilmember Wesselek.
Good evening. Thank you to all who shared comments. I have what I thought was a hodgepodge of things to mention. So I'll mention some of the hodgepodgey ones, and then I think I have something that's a little more cohesive. One, I know last week, I think we spoke about some of the high school graduates. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the other parents that kids in elementary and middle school, that'll be ending soon. So I know my life's about to start being quite different. So solidarity to all the parents out there. Two, thank you to Mayor Searcy for the proclamation for LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And I want to speak to any folks in that community to know that I believe we all care deeply about protecting this community and want to see that in action. Okay, so if you have any ideas or concerns that we as a city could address, I really invite folks to come to me with those ideas. Okay. All right, and then the other things I realized they kind of all come back to community. So this morning I was at Tacoma Park Elementary School for their career day. So talking about being a council member with kindergarten class, first grade and second grade class. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great event. It's a great school. But I realized in my presentation, the theme that I didn't realize until I was giving it was about how it's up to all of us to take care of our community. That it's up to all of us to vote. It's up to all of us to speak up and to point out the things that need to change and can be improved. So I wanted to, in that way, I wanted to lift up a couple things. This past weekend, I went to the New Hampshire Gardens picnic. So I want to thank Daryl and Angela and Michael John and the others who organized that. It was a nice event. They had a plant and seed exchange. I want to thank and congratulate some folks in my neighborhood in Hillwood Manor, Pam and Chipper and Phyllis, who were nominated for an Azalea Award for all their work on our community garden. And lastly, to Pam, in particular, Pam Spar, who lives down the street from me. Last night, or yesterday, she sent an email out to our neighborhood saying that there was a strawberry moon. And if folks wanted to meet up, we would walk out onto the trail up high to see if we could see the moon. And my whole family went, and some other neighbors went, and it was really nice. And we got to look. Someone brought binoculars, and it was really nice. And I say these things because I want to thank and lift up the folks that lead these activities and these ways to connect in our communities, and to thank and lift up the people that seek out the support when they need it, because that's the other side of it. So it was great hearing from so many folks about the grants. I'm really excited about that, and just about how it's our community. We all take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Just want to check really quickly to see if there's a hand raised from Councilmember Landman. I don't see one. Okay.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you poor thing. I am so sorry. Oh, Councilmember Landman is a little under the weather. A little. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and providing your feedback. I really want to make sure that I highlight all of the organizations that came out tonight. Cheer, Tommy's Pantry, Educare. I know that you're here because you are appreciative of what we are providing to you as a city through the grant. But I think it's really important for us to be able to say how much we appreciate you. Right now, we are living in a time where there are so many families that need that trusted hand of someone like Gigi that they trust, that they don't have to fear that they may be reported, to go to and ask for resources, to ask for help. And the fact that we have such a widespread network of organizations that have built the trust within our community, that are able to make sure that people who are in need are able to get what they need in a timely way and not have to be concerned or afraid to do so, is so important. It's more valuable than ever. So I do want to thank all of the organizations that are receiving the grants tonight, that applied for the grants, because at a time now when we are in desperate need of ensuring that we have community, you play a pivotal role in that. I don't want to belabor the meeting because we're already going long, but I do just quickly want to read something related to why we're looking at rent stabilization. I know there's been a question that was raised about this feels rushed. This feels like something that staff just came up with on their own. And so I'm going to read something. This is from the 2019 City of Tacoma Park Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan document. And the goal is to preserve existing businesses and affordable housing in Tacoma Park, including in revitalizing areas. And one of the objectives was to preserve the affordability of the existing multifamily housing stock. And strategy A, continue the rent stabilization program for multifamily buildings that lack other housing affordability protections. Assess the existing rent stabilization program and consider modifications to enhance its effectiveness. That is what the council agreed to and the direction that we set forth in 2019. Following councils continue to say, hey, we're going to have council priorities that include examining our rent stabilization law. And I appreciate the county exec for coming out tonight. I appreciate his passion and his words of wisdom. But I will say, since the time that he's been on council, in 2023, Montgomery County passed a rent stabilization law that looks very different from ours. In 2024, Prince George's County passed a rent stabilization law that looks very different from ours. Our goal continues to be to preserve, produce, and protect in this community as it pertains to our housing stock. But we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge that, yes, we are a special place, but we don't live on an island. We are surrounded by other communities that are trying to tackle the same thing, which is trying to bring affordability to the community. And I would be remiss if I did not call out that the city of Tacoma Park has not built new housing since the 80s. When I go to multifamily buildings across this city and I talk to the tenants, they are asking me for options. Affordable options are what I'm being asked for. I'm asked for larger units. I'm asked for more options. So I will say, I am committed to making sure that we have affordable housing in this city, but I am also committed to making sure that I'm not trapping people in units that they don't want to be in because there are no other options. That is what I am committed to. And that is why I think it's critically important that we do our due diligence as a city to just evaluate the extent to which the laws that we have in place are working. This didn't fall out of the sky. Council talked about this after 3 years of staff work to develop the 2019 Economic Development Strategic Plan. So while I appreciate the concern that is being raised, I do, and I appreciate the advocacy that residents in our community are pushing. I want to make sure that people know where my heart lies, where my goal lies, as a person that grew up in affordable housing, knowing how important mobility is to get you out of a situation. If your children have asthma and they're in a unit that their kids are having asthma attacks in, but there's nowhere else for them to go because they can't afford to go anywhere else. That's where I lived. So when I say that I am committed to affordability, I am. But I think it's critically important that we do our due diligence in this community to ensure that we provide options for those with the least among us. Okay, all right. On a separate note, I also had an opportunity to talk to third graders today at Rolling Terrace Elementary. I need to make sure I told them. They wrote me about the environments and about the importance of making sure that people are picking up trash. I told especially along the creek, staff, just so that you all know, They are aware that we have banned plastic bags. They are aware that we have gotten rid of straws. They would like for us to get rid of water bottles. Third graders in Roland Terrace would like for the city of Tacoma Park to ban water bottles and encourage members of the community to use refillable containers. And they also asked how old I was, and that was a lot of talent to try to get around that question. I want to also thank there was a lot of events that happened this weekend, but I want to thank the Tacoma Foundation for a wonderful, wonderful Azalea Award ceremony and all of the winners, congratulations, and all of the nominees, to just hear about all of the wonderful work that so many individuals are doing in our community is just so amazing. Also want to thank Historic Tacoma. I had a chance to go to the Tacoma Park House and Garden Tour, which was amazing. I got to absolutely amazing. If you have not had an opportunity to partake of any of the house and garden tours that the Historic Tacoma put on, you're missing out. Frederick Douglass's daughter's house was on the list, and we got a chance to I got a chance to walk through that. It's amazing. So definitely next year, check it out. Also want to thank Pat, the Play Lady, because I did have a chance to attend the adult play day that was at Bus Boys and do the chicken dance. So I'm grateful for that. This weekend, I will be, where in Tacoma Park is Talisha? Okay, I will be at on Saturday, the Pride Maker Market. That will be at Coma, so I will make sure that I am stopping by there. I will also be at the Tacoma Park annual homecoming, which will be at Argyle Local Park. So looking forward to both of those. And again, on Sunday, sending my heartfelt Happy Father's Day to all of the fathers that are participating this Sunday. And so with that, I will turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, for city manager comments. I'm sorry, I control you as well. In 1 second. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and guests tonight. I just have a brief report, given the substance we have on the agenda tonight. From the Department of Public Works, the city's contractor recently completed the new sidewalk installation on Darwin Avenue and Hodges Lane. Additionally, the repairs have been completed on the Boyd Avenue alley entrance to improve the access to the alley for residents. The application deadline for the Green Homes and Business Grant has been extended from June 13th to June 30th. The Green Homes and Businesses Grant 2025 is a funding opportunity aimed at improving environmental sustainability and energy efficiency for homes and businesses across the city. This grant helps reduce utility costs, improves indoor air quality, increases comfort, and supports the city's broader climate and sustainability goals. The application is accessed from the city's website. And from the Department of Information Technology and Human Resources. Our IT and Human Resource departments have been very busy with important projects. We would like to recognize and commend the outstanding work of the IT and HR team towards successfully transforming our outdated paper-heavy HR system into an efficient, streamlined online platform. This significant upgrade not only reflects the team's dedication and innovative spirit, but also marks a pivotal step forward in enhancing operational efficiency, accessibility, and data accuracy within our human resources processes. The team's commitment to embracing digital solutions has set a new standard for excellence and collaboration in our organization. The hard work, persistence, and expertise demonstrated throughout this project indicates the invaluable contribution for modernizing our HR infrastructure, and this has not gone unnoticed. Thank you, team, for driving this essential change that will benefit the entire organization for years to come. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on, if everybody's okay, to our first presentation for the evening, which is the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I will be starting us off, and then I'll be handing over to Oscar Garcia from RKNK. So tonight, we're just going to be presenting our 90% design to you guys. This project has been long in the making. We started in 2021 with the concept, and then 2023, we were awarded another grant to continue the design of the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project. And just contextually, we're doing a lot of work on pedestrian and bike safety within Takoma Park. And this project, the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project, forms a part of that full suite of what we've been doing. It's one of the 5 grants that address bikeways within the city. And then I just wanted to point out the public engagement that we've had thus far. We've had 10 pop-up events, 7 focus groups, 5 flyering events, 5 community meetings, 2 surveys, and 2 council meetings. And with that, I hand it over to Oscar.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'll start by stating the purpose of the project. So the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project reimagines Maple Avenue to create a safer, more comfortable, and more inviting environment for everybody who uses the corridor. That includes pedestrians, people on bicycles, people using scooters, transit users, and vehicles that travel along the corridor. The limits of the project are on the south side from the city limit, which is just north of Carroll Avenue, and to the north is the intersection of Sligo Creek Parkway and Hilltop Road. Just to give some brief background, the project is in alignment with the Takoma Park Master Plan of 2001 that recommends improvements to Maple Avenue. It's also in line with the 2018 County Bicycle Master Plan that recommends separated bike lanes along Maple Avenue between Philadelphia Avenue and Hilltop Road. And it's also in line with the 2024 Takoma Park Minor Plan Amendment that also proposed separated bike lanes along Maple Avenue. As Casey mentioned, some of the background on the project is the timeline. So the design component of the project began in 2020 when the city was awarded a grant by MWCOG to do preliminary design. After that, there was a series of public meetings. There was a city council meeting, and the preliminary design was completed in June 2021. After that, there was a second grant that was awarded to the city by the MDOT Bikeways Network Program. That was on October 2022. There was a consultant selected on March 2023. We took the preliminary design, made some revisions that were presented to the public on January 2024. We completed the 30% design in January of this year, and just recently completed the 90% design last month. So that's where we are here at the City Council meeting. And looking ahead, we don't have a clear date for the completion of the project, and the city doesn't have currently a schedule for construction and implementation. As Casey mentioned, there has been some robust public engagement that has been done as part of the project. On this phase of the design, there has been a series of pop-ups and focus groups that took place on 2023. And there was a public meeting, open house on January of 2024, where we shared with the community the revisions to the preliminary design. And this, the open house, the community had an opportunity to provide their comments in person, but also there was a platform line where members were able to make a comment, put a pin on the map to make sure that their concerns and what they like, what they didn't like was included in the survey. We received more than 50 comments that were later reviewed and considered for later revisions to the design. So before we get into the design, I wanted to do a brief description of the existing conditions. The project is divided in two segments. One is from the city line to Philadelphia Avenue, and the other one is Philadelphia Avenue to Hilltop Road. This segment, the southern segment, consists mainly of single-family homes. The road operates as a yield street, meaning that because of the narrow nature of the roadway, vehicles have to negotiate the right-of-way as they come in opposite directions. The section between the city line and Tulip Avenue is the narrowest. It's 22 feet wide, with parking only on the northbound side. This basically reduces the travel lane to 14 feet that has to be shared with traffic in both directions. There's continuous sidewalk on both sides, but only the north side has a green buffer. And for bicycles, this means that they have to share the lanes with vehicular traffic. And this section is serviced by the ride-on Route 25. From Tulip Avenue to Philadelphia Avenue, the main difference, the road operates the same way. The main difference is that there is a wider footprint of roadway, but at the same time, there's parking now on both sides of the street, which basically brings us back to the same issue that it's a yield road where vehicles have to negotiate the right of way. All other conditions remain the same. Continuous sidewalk only on the northbound side. On both sides, but only buffer on the northbound side, and bicycles need to share the road with vehicles. Now, the northern segment between Philadelphia Avenue and Sligo Creek Parkway, the land use changes drastically. Now we're looking at apartment complexes, some local businesses, the Piney Branch Elementary School, and some of the Tacoma Park services like the community center, public library, and the offices. The width of the road is variable, but what is constant is the distribution of the road. So for the most part, it has parking on both sides of the road. 2 travel lanes, one in each direction, that is being shared with bicycles. And there is continuous buffer sidewalk on both sides of the roadway. There is a Capital Bike Share station, and in addition to Route 25, Routes 17 and 18 service this section of the corridor. In terms of parking, the city conducted a parking study in June of 2023, and they counted basically how many parking spaces are available. For the southern section, they counted 138 spaces. At the time of the study, 27% was in use. On the northern section, there are 116 spaces. At the time of the study, 75% was in use. They also counted off-street spaces. This means the spaces that are available on the parking lots for the buildings. And 1,177 spaces were counted, with 83% on average use at the time of the study. So some of the conclusions of the parking study are that there is basically enough off-street parking to accommodate the demand of the on-street parking. It's just that the distribution between the buildings is not very even. In terms of spaces occupied by a single vehicle all day, they found 20% of spaces. This was the case for 20% of the spaces on the northern side and 9% of the spaces on the southern side. And then about 4% of vehicles counted are work vehicles, meaning vans and commercial vehicles. Before I jump into the proposed improvements, and just to give like a little 101 on the type of infrastructure that is included in the project, I wanted to explain some of the concepts. So starting left to right, a shared lane is basically a travel lane that is shared between vehicles and bicycles on a bike designated route. A single or conventional bike lane is basically a bike lane that is separated from vehicular traffic by a pavement marking. And a protected or separated bike lane is a bike lane that is separated from vehicular traffic by an actual buffer. And this buffer is normally striped. You can also include flex posts, curb stops, or any other methods to prevent vehicles from encroaching into the bike lanes. Other concepts are the chicanes or curb extensions. This is just a tool on the toolbox that engineers and planners have to control traffic or to mitigate speeds on corridors. This is basically just a curb extension that is the same width as a parked vehicle. It provides opportunities for adding like a grass buffer or some plantings. Also, in some areas that are adjacent to bus stops, it can create space for basically widening the area where transit users can wait for the bus. And they're more efficient than speed humps. They help the slow vehicles by narrowing basically the space or creating the illusion that you're passing through a narrower section of the road, even though it's the same, but because of the hard curve, it induces a speed reduction on vehicles. The other concept is the bus stop platform. This is just a platform for bicycles that eliminates the conflict between buses and bicycles on a bike lane. And the other one is the floating bus stop island or boarding bus island, which is similar to the bus stop platform, but this is basically placing the bike lane behind the bus stop and eliminating also the conflict between buses and bicycles. So for the southern section, if we cut across section, just to look at what would be the proposed configuration, you will see on the left side, we will have parking only on one side of the street, leaving the rest for two-way traffic, alleviating the yield situation, giving more room for vehicles to travel along the corridor. And in the condition where we have a chicane, basically the chicane will serve almost as a parked vehicle, but that will provide, in most cases, excuse me, a landscape or a buffer, and we will continue to have two-way traffic along the corridor, alleviating, again, the yield condition. So this is kind of what it would look like in plan view. You have a parking lane, two travel lanes, then the chicanes. As vehicles, in this case, if they travel north, meaning towards the right of the screen, they will basically shift to the top of the screen and the parking lane now will be at the bottom of the screen. So they will be kind of like going up. It will be intermittent, the parking and the traffic. And these slides will show some of the revisions that were made after the public meeting that we had back in January of last year. The Tulip Avenue intersection, this is one of the examples where a curb extension can be used to enhance a transit waiting area. So at the corner, we're providing a curb extension that will basically expand the area where transit users can access the bus, and this provides opportunity for shelter, a bench, or some trash cans, or any other signage or amenities. This at the time, the all stop configuration was also being proposed, and that was something that came out at the public meeting. But gladly, the city didn't wait for this project, and now this intersection, as I noticed today, is an all-way stop. The other revisions that came after the public meeting at the Valley View Avenue and Old Philadelphia Avenue, we're adding pedestrian crossings. And at the, I guess, south of Valley View Avenue, this is a curb extension that is one of the largest, and it's adding a grass buffer between the travel lane and the sidewalk where there is none. Now, looking at the northern section, this is a typical section. This is the most predominant section. I mean, where we are taking the parking lane on the southbound direction and repurposing the existing width of the road to accommodate protected bike lanes, one on each side of the road on each direction, keeping on-street parking on the northbound direction, and maintaining two travel lanes for vehicles. Behind the curb, we're not really doing much. We're just upgrading some of the pedestrian infrastructure, so the sidewalk and the existing buffer will remain in place. So between the southern section where we have the share lanes and the northbound section where we have the protected bike lanes, there's a need for a gradual transition. So looking at the intersection of Philadelphia Avenue, on the left side, we have the share lanes. On the north side, this section of the roadway is a little bit atypical because we have three travel lanes. We're maintaining the right turn lane if you're traveling south of Maple Avenue, turning right onto Philadelphia Avenue. So because of that, we are not able to accommodate a protected bike lane. So we are extending the shared lane condition, but we're keeping protected bike lane on the southbound side. And throughout the corridor, from Philadelphia Avenue to the northern end, this protected bike lane on the southbound side is maintained. The only variation is on the northern side, on the northbound side, where we are gradually getting to the protected bike lane because of the restrictions we have on existing right-of-way. At this location, we're keeping parking also in front of the city offices, as well as on the northbound side, there is also city parking. Some of the improvements, the always stop at Grant Avenue that is currently installed. And here after Grant Avenue, we transition from a shared lane on the northbound direction to a single bike lane. Again, on the southbound direction is constantly a protected bike lane. And we have here at the north leg of the intersection, another enhanced bus waiting area. This condition, the single bike lane extends up to Sherman Avenue. North of Sherman Avenue, that's where we have protected bike lanes on both sides. So this is the transition from a single bike lane to a protected bike lane. And this condition stays throughout the rest of the corridor. Other improvements that came out after the public meeting, we added new pedestrian crossings. One of them is Lincoln Avenue. We're on the north side of the intersection of Lincoln Avenue. We're also adjusting the southern crossing to make the distance that pedestrians have to cross shorter. And finally, at the northern end of the project, the transition, this shows the transition between the protected bike lanes and the shared lanes that are north of the intersection. Finally, this is a photo simulation of what the proposed improvements or the final condition will be. This is at Ritchie Avenue. At the buffer, the idea is to put some tool. We can look at curb stops or flex posts, something to prevent vehicles from encroaching into the bike lane. That's still something that will be included in the final design. And finally, as part of the project, we were scoped to conduct a feasibility study to improve the bridge over Sligo Creek. This bridge is currently about 3 foot wide, so that is not accessible, and it's also in need of an upgrade. So for this feasibility study, we look at different options. One of them was completely replacing the bridge, the vehicular bridge, replacing it with a wider structure that would accommodate bike lanes and also have a sidewalk on the northbound direction. Other option was to widen the existing bridge to accommodate, to make this section accessible and accommodate bicycles and pedestrians. And the other options were three new structures that you can see here. Alternative A on the southbound direction, a new bridge. Alternative B on the northbound direction, and alternative C, basically a detached alternative from the roadway that will connect to Sligo Creek Trail. And you can see the costs, estimated costs for each one of those alternatives. So that's all I have. I think.
Thanks, Oscar. And I should have introduced myself. I'm Kaysen Webley. I'm the transit planner. This slide will be posted to the webpage, and further details can be found on the webpage that links to the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project. I have a list of the public engagements that were done if anybody wants to look at that in more detail, and that also will be on the webpage. Thank you all for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Just as a reminder for my colleagues, if you have a question, you just want to hit the button on your mic and we'll transfer you over. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I certainly get excited when I see bikeways as I'm a cyclist commuter. I'm interested in the public input process. I saw the number of meetings and opportunities that were held. I wondered if there is any way for the team to show how they received, responded to, and incorporated the public comments into the percentage designs. Yeah.
Right. So there were a series of pop-ups and this focus group meetings that took place before the public meeting, and I think the city collected those comments. In addition to the comments received at the public meeting, those were looked at and considered. You know, some of them were just general comments. Some of them were things that we were not able to accommodate, and some of them were things that we were like, oh, that's a great idea. We can incorporate those. So in terms of the collection of the comments during the public meeting, we had roadmaps that people from the community could put a post-it and say, this is what I think should look like. And there was also an open discussion, as you saw on the photo of the slide. And also online for people that could not attend the event, there was a story map that basically had a description of the project with a comment period after the public meeting. So people could, even the people that attended, could have the opportunity to digest the information at their own leisure and provide comments and put them online in the same way that you could do it with a post-it. You put a pin on the online and write your comment. So that was kind of like the comment collection process. In terms of the incorporation, how we incorporate those comments, like I said, we look at each one of those comments. We provide responses point by point, and definitely whatever comment was possible to include was included in the design.
I just wanted to add that most of the public engagement would have taken place in the earlier parts of the project, so that we could incorporate those comments into the design.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And so I assume a lot of those records don't exist anymore if they're post-it notes and things, but I was wondering, there have been two basic foundational comments that I've heard from people, including one from Chantal this evening. One comment is that I saw in the chat from the Zoom meeting, an individual saying that the residents on Maple Avenue, they're fine with sharing the lanes with cars, and they actually feel that it doesn't feel dangerous. And then the other comment was that cyclists already are choosing to use the bike route on Cedar Avenue in the southern section of the neighborhood as it comes out right by the metro. And I hardly ever say, oh, based on my experience, but honestly, I will always take that easier hill, and I'll always avoid Maple and Carroll in DC. So did you consider like the kind of do nothing or do less options? And if so, how were those ruled out? And did you consider the impact for cyclists and vehicles at the DC intersection just outside the city limits at Maple and Carroll Streets Northwest?
So the section between Philadelphia Avenue and the project limits along Maple Avenue, there are no proposed facilities, bicycle facilities. Basically, the shared condition that exists today will remain. So if people are more comfortable taking Cedar, that is an option. If people want to continue on Maple Avenue, they can continue on Maple Avenue. So we're not really changing, in terms of bicycle facilities, we're not changing the conditions in this section of the corridor.
And regarding the northern section and the idea of the existing sort of shared lanes approach being acceptable to many people, how did the team respond to that?
Right. So I think like the transition between shared lanes and an open road scenario, there's really no method. It's just a sign that says bicycles can use full lane, or but in terms of a facility or a type of transition between a shared lane scenario and basically what is a road that is acceptable for bicycles, there is no way to transition. The only thing is we looked at it. We looked at the bigger picture, knowing that what other facilities are in the area, what other connections can be made, and there was really no changes needed. At least it's part of the scope of the project.
I know I need to get off the mic, so.
You do.
But I did, yeah, sorry. I'm just
You do.
wondering, what evidence is there of conflicts right now between cyclists and vehicles?
And just as a reminder, there's 3 other people in queue, and we have 5 more minutes remaining for this topic. So we'll let this question go, Councilmember Schlegel, but if you have additional questions, I would respectfully ask for you to submit them to staff. Go
Madam
ahead.
Mayor, if I may.
Mhm.
Deb McNally with the Housing and Community Development Department. So one of the things I want to highlight about Northern Maple is there are a number of major trip generators that would generate trips for not just what we would consider adult cyclists, but also children as well, including Piney Branch Elementary, the library, and the community center. And one of the things I would encourage if people are, interested in some of the major documents is Montgomery County's bicycle master plan, which does a great job laying out what they call level of stress. And that is about safety and perceptions of safety, and is a big part of what we're thinking about when we're proposing alterations to our right-of-way.
Thank you very much. And just a quick follow-up, because I, too, I guess, Upper Maple, I've seen and have been very nervous driving down Maple and seeing the younger bicyclists, because whereas I would never be able to make it up that hill, they love to fly down it going towards the municipal building. Council Member Dabala, you're next.
Okay. So I have a bunch of questions, but we're going to skip to the one where you went to the planning board recently to get comments on, and I'm a little confused, 30% or the 90% design, which one? But what I really want to know is, what did you hear from them, and what changes did you make or will you make to respond to that?
Right. So the mandatory referral process began at 30%. That's when they look at the plans. So they look at the design that was done at 30%, which is the concept is not that much different. There's just some variations of the design. The comments that we got, top of my head, they were asking about the elements that were going to be installed to separate vehicular traffic from the bike lanes. They wanted to understand the location of the chicanes, and also they wanted to make sure that with the installation of the chicanes, that vehicles will be able to travel to make the turns, and that we were not creating like a choking point, which was already done by the design team.
I'll just add quickly, Roz Grigsby, Planning Manager for the city. We have received the letter of transmittal from the Montgomery Planning Board from staff, which I can post to the webpage and share with council. Many of the things they mentioned, like make sure the intersections are ADA compliant and things like that, have already been folded into the design as it's developed. But I'm happy to make that available.
Thank you. So it was basically a positive review. Okay.
Correct.
And the other thing that I wanted to check on, I didn't quite follow the parking on the northern stretch seemed to move from side to side, and maybe you could explain why that is.
So this is the case on the southern section. So between
No, I'm talking about the northern section.
on the northern side, no, the northern side, there's parking on the northbound side.
Uh-huh.
The only area where there is parking on the southbound side is in front of the city's offices.
What about the school?
On the school is gonna be on the northbound side.
The parking.
Yes.
Okay, and so what does that do to the bike lanes? There's still 2 bike lanes.
Right.
All the way through.
Yes.
Okay.
So, so when there is, I could probably see maybe the next one on the northbound side, the bike lanes will be, when it's protected, it will be against the curb. So
Okay.
there'll be, maybe we can go back to the other slide.
Right, so if there's parking, it's not against the,
So you can see it on the slide. So on the right
there
side,
we go.
you see there's the curb, there's a bike lane, buffer, and then the parking lane.
Okay.
On the opposite side, on the southbound direction, there's no parking, so the bike lane will be buffered against the travel lane.
Okay,
not the parking lane.
so then help me out here. Why is the parking on the city offices side, why is that not just on the other side where everything else is, where all the other parking is? What was the reason for switching that?
In front of the office of the city offices, there's parking on both sides.
Both sides?
Yes. So this is the only section where we managed to keep parking on both sides.
And the reason you were able to do that was because it's wider there,
It's
the
wider,
road?
Yeah, because right now, it's a wider section.
Okay, thank you. And is there a simple, last question, is there a short answer to the question, how does this design differ from the one before it that was the subject of public comment and so forth? Is it just some of the details, or is there some major change?
So from the 30% design, you mean, to
Yes.
90? Okay. So the concept is the same. We're, in terms of the protected bike lanes on the northern section and the chicanes on the southern section is mostly, for example, one of the comments we got was the always stop on Grant Avenue, which we already had in mind, and the city kind of installed it already. There were some comments about connecting and also you can see it also on this slide, connecting how our bicycles are going to connect to the school. So we basically make that intersection wider to accommodate bicycles, so people biking can cross comfortably and access the school. So there were just treatments more than a conceptual, more than the concept, were treatments at certain locations that people thought of being critical.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanna
Councilmember DeBala, I'm really sorry, but we have two more people in queue, and I've extended us 5 minutes. So we're going to move on.
I have one sentence.
Quick.
It's not a question, it's a sentence.
Okay.
I just wanted everybody to know that I had asked already that when funding sources are identified, that we double back with the folks who live on the northern stretch of Maple and explain all the changes to them that have been made. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Honzak.
I'm going to defer to my Councilmember Gilbert because I'm not sure he's had a chance to ask as many questions as I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Councilmember Konzak. Just my quick question was really quick. It was, what time of day was the study done for the parking, specifically for the northern side?
It was 24 hours, almost.
Yeah. So that was through the entire day, basically from the early in the morning to at midnight. We had our previous planner, Alex Friedman, out there counting cars. So tried to capture the full scope of when what was happening at our parking spaces.
And that number topped off at 75% on that northern side?
I don't have the study in front of me, so I'm gonna say your number is correct.
The slide is.
Yeah. So for the northern section, 75% was used at the time of the study.
Average, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Honzak, hit your. Okay. There you go.
Thank you. I did have a chance to ask a number of my questions, and I appreciate that, Council. I appreciate that to the entire team that answered my questions on this project. If anyone hasn't looked at the parking study in depth, I really encourage you to do that. I had not had a chance to see it until I was sitting in those sessions and really digging in, and it did satisfy a lot of my concerns about parking. Looking at the presentation, however, I do share the one concern that Councilmember DeBala brought up about the transition between the northern and the southern section, because that is an intersection, and that's where some of the bad stuff actually usually happens. So I think it's really, and it's also right where our schools are. So I just think perhaps that's one decision point that should be reconsidered at some point when we're getting to the final stages of funding. But I do understand that we're now, 90, 100%. And I want to reiterate my support that you said the county suggested that they were interested in what elements were going to be installed between the bike lanes in that crisscross pattern. That was the one thing I thought was particularly concerning when I saw the initial story map. And so I'm happy to hear that the county shared those concerns and you said that that is possible. So I just want to reiterate that. And then finally, I'm quite interested in learning more about the Maple Bridge, because that does connect Ward 5 to all of this other stuff. And it definitely isn't very functional at the moment. So I see the numbers, but I'm not really clear on the conclusion that we draw from that, or what the staff is thinking now that that feasibility study has been done.
Yeah, so the bridge is controlled by MNC PPC. So this is our way of kind of working through these questions and then providing them with kind of a design and some alternatives and using that to push that conversation along.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that answered my question, who's going to pay for that bridge? And I would assume that it would be Park and Planning and CPPC. Okay, well, thank you so much for
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Landman?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you can see it. I raised my hand on your screen or not.
No, unfortunately,
may
I
ask a
cannot.
Question or two quickly?
If you could please hold it to one question. I'm really sorry. It's 9:30 and we still have the grants folks here waiting to present.
Understood. Looking at this, especially looking at the area around the Tulip Avenue intersection on the hilly part of Maple, which I'm calling the hilly part because I think it's a lot clearer to many people than the northern and southern references. That's an area where there's a great deal of parking, short-term parking that occurs all the time, especially during school pickup and drop-off times and during church times, because of the church with no parking lot that you heard about earlier this evening from one of the speakers. And as you noted, there's not really any additional bike infrastructure going in, but the chicanes and the things that block off portions of the roadway for curb extensions and so forth will reduce the feasibility of and the viability of all the short-term parking that goes on there. And I do not understand why that is considered a bonus for the bikers who get no additional bike resources, but it makes it a lot more difficult for other roadway users. And some bikers have indicated that they think that the chicanes, especially when you consider there'll be buses on the street, will cause more weaving back and forth of the bicycles than they have to do today. So if you could just clarify why this presents any kind of benefit for the bikers, I would really like to know, because it will be a deficit for a lot of the people at the daycare center and the church. Thank you.
So the main benefit of the chicanes is traffic calming. They're more effective than speed humps. They're easier to navigate for cyclists, where if you are going uphill and you have a speed hump, you have to kind of like lose momentum to get over the speed hump. So with the chicanes, we're removing the speed humps. The speed humps will be replaced by chicanes, so that will make traveling on a bicycle easier. And since they're more effective on traffic calming, they will be expected that vehicular speeds will be lower.
And I would just add that Tulip intersection is also a bus stop area, and it provides safer waiting area for those persons taking the bus.
Thank you very much. And so thank you very much for this presentation. And just as a reminder for folks that may be watching at home, we're refining designs, but again, we still will need the resources necessary to ultimately construct any of the bike lanes that are included in the design. The next item this evening is the FY 2026 Community Quality of Life Grant recommendations. And thank you, committee members, for your patience.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys, I'm going to make this so brief. You're going to be excited. I'm Kara Tallow. I'm co-chair of the Community Grants Review Committee in Tacoma Park. Rena Schiff was with us, and I'm afraid she had to run. But she gets points for being here. These are the members of our committee, the 8 people who helped us to review applications that were submitted. There were 23 in total, and determine funding allocation recommendations for each of the groups that we decided to proceed with. You can see from this slide, and some of you will recall that earlier this year, we did work with council to update the guidelines defining the community quality of life grant distribution so that we could more effectively respond to the evolving needs of our community and respond to council priorities. So what you see here are the broad strokes of the parameters within which we worked for this cycle of grant distribution. As you can see, there are a total of 23 applicants for this $110,000 pool of funding taken from the general fund. Fairly significant increase, as you can see from these 2 charts, year over year from 2025, FY 2025. These applications, 23 in total, were a third of those were for food insecurity reduction programs. 11 of the applications, nearly half, were for youth enrichment programs for science and the arts, and that had previously been the sort of whole of our mandate, and so we were pleased to see there was still a healthy distribution there, and the remainder for workforce development. When we put out the call for applications several months ago, we gave about a month for those applications to come in, and then we started our committee review process. That meant that we started with individual assessments, so each of the members you saw on our committee went through and individually in the grants review portal went through and looked at the goals and the implementation plans for each organization and their application based on the parameters that I've mentioned. And then we brought our recommendations back together to the committee and had a substantial group discussion about the merits of each application. In that group discussion, we came to a consensus about which organizations to drop from consideration based on which organizations rated below a certain number for us, using an average of everyone's scores. And then we averaged the recommended funding amounts for the remaining organizations based on our feedback. So as you can see, the $110,000 in city funds is going much further than that, thanks to the matching commitments of applicants. And I will note that even though we changed in the community quality of life grant application language, we changed the requirement for matching funds to be an endorsement or encouragement of matching funds, and yet this is still an increase year over year in matching funds. So we were pleased to see that that number continued to rise, even as we built in flexibility for organizations. You can see, and in your prep packets that you all have as well, you'll be able to see the recommended distributions of the funds here. At this point, Patty and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Well, that was fast. So I feel even more horrible that we made you sit through all of that, all of these other.
It was illuminating.
So first, thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. In looking over the options, I just kind of did one of these because I felt like this was exactly what the diversity that we were really hoping to achieve through some of the guidance that was provided in terms of making sure that we were able to focus on more areas. Can we, and I know Educare is not available, but so for Educare, they received funds for the food pantry as well as their workforce program.
That's correct. And I will say for the, Patty will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe for the 2 organizations that we funded there were 2 organizations that had 2 applications each. And for those 2 that we did agree to fund, those organizations, each of them, one of those was a bridge grant and one of those was a new application for funds.
Okay.
And so that was the one reason we talked a lot about whether one organization needed access twice to these community funds. And our determination was the bridge grants were in such a different category and at such a reduced rate versus the ARPA funding that they had previously accessed, which is now discontinued, that it made sense to fund both.
To fund both. And so basically, if it's a bridge, meaning they receive funds for these kinds of things, and it's kind of more of like continuation versus something that is brand new. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's
Okay.
correct. For the bridge, we had agreed that since we're changing things to be the federally funded ARPA funds for food insecurity reduction were distributed and will expire in December, whereas the funds for community quality of life grants will be accessible according to council approval almost immediately, and then will last until next spring when there will be another, hopefully, application cycle for additional grants. And so we thought it is not ideal to leave folks that we had gone through the process of assessing and determined that their goals were a top priority for the community, to leave them for 6 months without funding. So we allowed them to open up and ask for reduced funding.
Excellent. Councilmember Hanzar?
I just wanted to say thank you for your very, very hard work. This is one of the most challenging committees, I think, to be on because you have a lot of work. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel?
I also want to thank you. It's a great presentation. I wondered whether any of these organizations have been invited to do longitudinal studies. I'm particularly thinking about the workforce development so that they can see the impact and check in with people maybe 3-5 years later.
No, but that's a great idea. I can definitely take that back to the group. I know one of the things that we've been talking about per our earlier conversation with council around redefining the parameters of our committee was building in more opportunities for groups to come together, share ideas, and allow us to get a sense of what's working and what's not in the work that they've been doing, so we can weave that into each year as we come back and think about what the priorities should be for grant distribution. And talking with council, we can weave that knowledge into it. And so this is another one I'll put on our
And
list.
with youth enrichment as well, maybe it would be great to if people are comfortable being checked in on later.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just as a little bit of a caveat, longitudinal studies by grantees are expensive, and sometimes they may request compensation if you're asking for them to not only provide programming, but to actually track individuals over time as part of, in many cases, as part of like program evaluation efforts. So whereas there may be a desire to share best practices, but when you get into the space where you're asking for them to monitor people who participated in their program over time and do follow-up, just a little bit of caveat that then becomes, okay, well, am I going to see some sort of increase in my award to allow for me to bring someone in to actually do something like that? So I wouldn't necessarily go towards the longitudinal study approach, but I would say that it would be beneficial to make sure that there's things like learning collaboratives where you can kind of bring your grantees together, have them talk about some of their experiences, some of the pros, some of the cons, have someone either from staff or from the committee that's there that's able to take notes of those things that could ultimately be used for the next cohort of grantee.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It was great to have the material ahead of time that be able to ask all my little nudgy questions yesterday. This is great work and I really appreciate it. And I'm especially pleased that it isn't all food insecurity grants, which is also what I thought was going to happen. So good to know. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Seeing no more lights. Thank you very much. I am so excited. I know that I've had an opportunity to go to a few of the grantee events and it's been so much fun. So I am definitely looking forward to being able to experience what some of the grantees that are receiving the awards this time are doing in the community.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, all right. We're going to move on to our voting session. We are making up time, folks. We're making up time. Okay, so. Okay, we're going to move into our voting session. I just want to make sure, Councilmember Landman, can you, just want to make sure that you can hear us.
I can hear you and I have unmuted myself, so I can be heard.
Excellent. Perfect. So we are just activating everyone's mics. We're going to move into the voting session. Because Councilmember, we're dealing with a hybrid situation, the clerk will call the roll on each. The first item is second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Chapter 6.08 rental housing licenses and owner occupied group house registrations. Would someone like to move it?
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Councilmember Honzak, for seconding. Any points of discussion? Okay, seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
I'm sorry, you probably couldn't hear me. Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselek,
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Next item is the first reading ordinance approving FY26 budget amendment number 4. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Any points of discussion?
Mayor, I'm not sure if you said FY25 or FY26,
Oh.
because I have it wrong on the agenda. It should be the FY25.
It should be FY20. I was
Budget
just
amendment.
reading from the agenda. I
Yeah.
apologize. All right, so I'm just going to say first reading ordinance approving FY25 budget amendment number 4. I just want to confirm, Councilmember Westlake, you're okay with moving
Yes.
the FY25? Councilmember Gilbert, you're okay with seconding?
Yes.
Excellent. Any points of discussion?
Question.
Councilmember DeBala.
So the only change here from the last time we talked about this is the removal of the 71,000 for the parking for the paving the parking lot, correct?
You should be able to hit it. Oh, it's not? Okay, let's see. Maybe it's too many mics on. Yep, too many. Let me turn myself off.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That's correct. It's $85,000 that was removed.
Oh, right, leaving $71,000. Thank you. Yep, that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Seeing no more points of discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert, Councilmember Honzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselek,
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay. The next item is the consent agenda. I believe Councilmember Schlegel would like to make to pull item C from the consent agenda for a separate vote. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm not sure how to do that.
Go
in
ahead and make that-
Parliamentary terms, but I would like to make a motion to remove the item, agenda item 5A, the resolution authorizing the police department to enter into a new 5-year contract with Axon, from the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Wesselak. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to vote on that one separate. So we're going to vote on the consent agenda, which now consists of the single reading ordinance authorizing renewal of contract for engineering services with Rummel Klopper Khan, single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for architectural and contract administration services with Bignell Watkins Hasser, and a resolution authorizing submission of FY26 state revitalization grant program applications. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Any points of discussion for the consent agenda? Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert, Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Now, our separate vote is a single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a service and equipment contract with Axon. Would someone like to move it? Do I not have anyone wanting to move the contract? Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Hanzak. Any points of discussion on this?
I would like to raise points. I believe that it would be wise for us and prudent as a council to set this item aside for the time being until we can get any necessary additional information about Axon. There are some concerns that, they may be unfounded, but just reading from their website, I'll just present a couple of the way they present themselves. Axon Fusus is our industry-leading real-time crime center technology in the cloud. Fusus delivers a unified operating picture, equipping officers and response teams with vital intelligence derived from both Axon-owned and third-party sensors. This capability allows agencies to proactively assess incidents before they escalate, significantly improving incident response. The integration of AI-enhanced image search and alert systems within Fusus enables law enforcement to respond to crimes more swiftly, facilitating a more efficient criminal justice process from capture to courtroom. I could read some other pieces, but their values seem to be streamlining the judicial process and speeding up evidence review, speeding up report writing time. And I'm concerned that they're talking a lot about how they're using AI and integrating that into their business model. And AI concerns me from an environmental standpoint to begin with, but it also concerns me that in the current national climate, we don't know sitting here right tonight, I think, how this company is potentially willing to be integrated with other data systems that are being used in this country.
So I want to make sure that the point that's being raised is germane to what it is that we are voting on tonight. So I guess this is, and I don't know if our police chief is here.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that what we are purchasing it's not does not use AI, and I just want to confirm that with the police chief.
Yes, chief is on.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. There's the ability to use the AI technology. We do not anticipate using the AI technology. As we said earlier, this is a sole source provider. They're providing the technology. We decide what to do with it, and that would be more on the policy end, not the product end. If there needs to be a discussion on the policy, I think we're going to be reviewing our body-worn camera policy with the council as well in the near future. So that would be where we would discuss the nuts and bolts of how we utilize the technology. We don't use facial recognition technology. We don't use AI technology. We don't anticipate doing so. So I think this is more of a policy question as to what we do with the technology as opposed to purchasing the technology. There are significant savings associated with this. And as I said earlier, there's also a sole source provider. So there's really no one else that's going to be able to provide this technology at this point. And listening to some of the residents testifying earlier, I didn't hear them asking for us to immediately pull away from Axon, but if we renew the contract, to then evaluate whether or not there are other companies available that would provide the services that are not Axon.
Thank you, Chief Duvall. That is what I recall hearing as well. And given that this is the only source of this equipment, and we are currently using said technologies, and the renewal would allow for us to increase cost savings. While I recognize Councilmember Schlegel's point, I feel very strongly that that for the purpose of renewing the contract, we should proceed and definitely have conversations regarding our body-worn camera policies as we are engaging in upcoming conversations regarding Public Safety Task Force recommendations that also relate to body-worn cameras.
That's a good question.
Councilmember Westlake.
My question is, do we know of, is there any penalty if we say 3 years out wanted to stop using the Axon products? So this is the 5-year contract. What is the penalty if we stopped it sooner than 5 years?
So it's an initial actual 3-year contract, and then the last 4th and 5th year we would have to go before council to renew. So even though it's for a duration of 5 years, the first 3 years are the only ones that would be locked in. So 3 years from now, we would have to come back to council and get approval for that 4th and 5th year of the contract.
But if we say wanted to pull out in 2 years, is there a penalty?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Westlake, I didn't hear what you said.
The question was if we were to pull out in 2, normally if you sign a 3-year contract, most folks understand that option years are just that, optional. And so you don't have to, they're not expecting you to automatically commit to years 4 and 5. But if you're signing a 3-year contract, then usually you have to adhere to the 3. So Chief, the question is, if you were to basically break a contract, meaning you sign a contract for 3 years, but in 2 decide that you don't want to proceed, what would be the cost implication for that?
I don't have the contract directly in front of me. I could get that information to the council. I know that once we sign that 3-year contract, we're kind of locked in. I cannot stress enough how important this technology is to transparency within the police department, and any potential gap in having body-worn camera footage, and also being able to access the video that's stored is critical. I am very concerned if there would be any gap in service that we wouldn't have body-worn cameras for our officers. And as I said, there's nothing more important than every interaction that our officers have with a member of the public being captured on video. So that concerns me as well. But I'd have to refer to the contract for specific penalties that would be incurred if we discontinued the contract prior to 3 years.
Councilmember Honzak.
Just briefly, I found your comments very compelling, Ms. Moore. It was interesting to hear some of these in-depth findings that you had about the company, and it makes me want to learn more. And I'm sure that we'll be asking some tough questions over the next few years. But given that we do have a sole source provider and it is technology that we're already using, and we're deriving a significant cost savings by making this commitment, I'm sorry to say, but I don't see any downside right now to moving forward. It's actually, 3 years, and the ability to renew it after that amount of time is really not a lot of time, and probably not very likely, in my humble opinion, that we're going to see another provider come online that will have the capacity to support us any sooner than 2 years, I would imagine, just given how quickly things move.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, just very quickly. I had, before the meeting and independent of all of this discussion, I had also looked into the company and reached essentially the same conclusion that on balance, we should go ahead with this now. And that it is a matter of city policy. Also, we are doing an AI policy more generally. So between those two opportunities to talk about how we use the technology and the information available from AI, I would be okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask the chief a follow-up question?
Sure.
Chief Duvall, if you said that it would take you a little bit of time to check the contract, would there be enough time for you to get back to us on that? Were we willing to postpone this vote by 1 week? And if we postpone this by 1 or 2 weeks, would that generate a gap in the service?
We have a quote that is locked in for a specific duration of time. Delays in executing the quote that's provided can potentially void the entire offer that's made. I'm assuming that someone has the the contract in front of them, they could very quickly, if someone on the dais can very quickly look at that contract clause for severing the contract. It's not hard to get. I just don't have it readily accessible in front of me to be able to look and ascertain what that penalty would be.
Okay.
But it should be very easily retainable. I don't know if someone can peruse it on the dais. It may be that easy to find.
And I also just want to remind my colleague that the motion on the floor is to vote on this contract. So we've already moved this. So I think it's prudent for us, if there are no other points of discussion, for us to move forward with the vote. Okay. Seeing no more points of discussion, could the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember Dvala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Nay.
Councilmember Gilbert, Councilmember Honzak, Councilmember Wesselek,
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay. While I figure out why some mics are turning green and others are not, we're going to move on to our last item this evening, which is the rent stabilization policy review scope of work. And let me try to fix this. We're going to go back to manual. We're going to get this on. This. And if it's okay, I think folks just need a quick, let's do a quick 10-minute break. Let's do a quick 10-minute break. All right, we'll be back at 10. It's only 10. All right. Thank you all so much for indulging us while we took a quick break. And so now we're going to move into our last work session for the evening, rent stabilization policy review scope of work. And so with that, I will turn things over to our Director of Housing and Community Development, Devin McNally. Let's turn your mic on. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Deb McNally with the Housing and Community Development Department. And so I will try to be brief since I know I'm the thing standing in between you and the ability to go home. But I'm here to present on the scope of work for a rent stabilization policy review. So really quickly, I'll just briefly go over our rent stabilization law in Tacoma Parks Code. What it does is it limits rent increases, which are limited to once every 12 months for every rental unit in the city, to the change in the Consumer Price Index, or CPI as it's usually known as. This governs about half of the city's rental units. There are some exemptions, so single-family homes, owner-occupied duplexes, ADUs, and deed-restricted affordable housing properties. So those are properties that have a regulatory agreement with a government agency that sets kind of rents at certain income levels, are exempted from the rent stabilization law. We have what's called as rent banking. And so what that means is if you choose not to take the full CPI in 1 year, you can't just do it the next year. The only way you can get it is once a tenant leaves and a new tenant moves in. There is the ability, as was mentioned by Mr. Elrich, that you can get a increase in your rent. The only way to do it now, and this has been changed several times over the years, so I understand there's sometimes confusion over it, is through what's called a fair return petition. That process looks back at the operating expenses and capital expenditures, so it's not forward-looking. You can't propose something. It looks only backwards, and it's reviewed by a third-party source who then makes a recommendation based on the analysis of the data provided. So we looked at some of our housing conditions back in 2022, and in particular, we looked at some of our rent data. We collect annual reporting data from our rent stabilized properties as part of compliance. And so in 2022, we took a look at that data, and what we found was that 14% of our rent stabilized units in the city are affordable to extremely low income residents. So those are households that make 30% of the area median income. To give you some numbers to that, that would be for a family of four, an income of $46,000. Almost all, 93%, would be considered affordable for very low income households. So that's 50% of AMI. For reference, that would be a family of four making $77,000. So these are essentially all properties that would be eligible for government subsidies based on those rents provided. And in many cases, what we found was our rent stabilized apartments have rents lower than the subsidized affordable housing. So think about your low income housing tax credit, anything receiving county funds. It is a very unique market that we have here in Tacoma Park. Of our rent stabilized properties, most of them are small scale properties that fall under rent stabilization. So 90% of our rent stabilized properties are 6 units or fewer. They make up about 43% of our total rent stabilized units, while the other 57% come from a smaller number of properties that have more units. Of our rent stabilized properties, 40% are self-managed according to their rental licenses. So what that means is that they don't have a property manager or an agent who manages the property on their behalf. the owner themselves are the ones going out there doing the repairs, leasing up the building. So a little bit of kind of what is coming through this study, and I won't sit on this too long. There have been a number of comments over the years about housing quality as an issue and reinvestment within buildings. There have been obviously discussions about the last time we built multifamily within the city. But then we have, since our last study that was done in around 2007, had a lot of changes in the area around us. Montgomery County has adopted rent stabilization, and Prince George's County has also adopted rent stabilization. So there has been an uptick of jurisdictions following our lead and bringing online policies similar to ours, but slightly different. And here we have a number of different policy documents, starting with our housing and economic development strategic plan, as well as council resolutions and our city council priorities, asking for a review of this policy. So as part of putting this scope together, there were kind of 4 major things that staff were looking at, starting with what we're trying to get out of this process and what's our goal. Thinking about community engagement, we want to make sure that we are capturing broad comments that capture the full scope of what's working, what's not, and making sure that everyone has the ability to participate in this discussion. We want to look at timeline and capacity. So one of the reasons why we have a scope is we want to bring on expertise and additional help. And then we also have to be aware of cost. There was $85,000 earmarked for FY26 for this effort. So we want to make sure that our scope fits roughly into what an $85,000 response might be from a potential consultant. One of the things that staff keeps in mind, I will harken back to our presentation back in July of last year, is the framework kind of around 3 pillars of kind of housing policy, which is choice, quality, and stability. And the idea is not that we have to hit the dead center, but we have to find Tacoma Park's specific balance amongst these 3 pillars. So looking at our study goal, we have kind of 3 general takeaways we want. We want to look at best practices, and what we mean by best practices is we want to look at other jurisdictions and what they're doing that seems to be working well, where we can learn from them and bring good ideas back. We want to engage with our tenants and landlords to understand where current policies are working and where they need maybe some concerns that need to be addressed. So what are our pain points? And supplement that with the data when we can from either the city itself or from the county or other data sources. And then based on kind of what we've learned, bringing that all together in recommendations for policy modifications that address the concerns that we uncover and implement changes based on that. I do want to highlight, once it was said earlier this evening, this is not a study that will consider or contemplate a full-scale repeal of rent stabilization. This is focused on modifications only. So speaking about the tasks, we have kind of 3 substantive tasks, 1 kind of project management task, and then an optional task in there as well. Starting with background and research. So looking at kind of what's happening right now in Tacoma Park, looking across the country at rent stabilization policies and approaches, and looking at comparable jurisdictions. And so there's a lot of ways that you can talk about what's a comparable jurisdiction. It might be the makeup of the jurisdiction. It might be, the housing typology. It might be their location, and it might be their size. And so working with the consultant, we would want to find jurisdictions that are comparable. I know that, New York City has a very complex and highly regimented rent stabilization scheme. They're a very big city, and so their kind of policies probably wouldn't be as transferable. So we want to look at places that we think we can pull out some ideas from. Our second task has to do with public engagement. This is looking at the policy itself and its impact, and also engaging with the public. So we've tried to bake in a fair amount of ability to go out and meet with key stakeholders and also the general public. So we have earmarked in here 3 public meetings, 4 work sessions with City Council, and 4 targeted stakeholder meetings. And what we're looking at for stakeholders are tenants, tenant advocacy groups, small landlords, and property managers. So people who on the ground are experiencing rent stabilization and can tell us more about it. The meetings ideally would be spaced out to allow for feedback. So the idea would be is that it would be part of the process of not only kind of learning, but also allowing them to see draft recommendations and kind of provide input as we go along that process. And all this comes together in the final task, which is a final report. So pulling it all together into draft recommendations based on kind of the previous 2 tasks, with the final deliverable being an adopted report with specific recommendations that can be implemented by the city. What does this timeline look like? The idea is kicking this off in September of this year with the background and comparison, and doing that background research, getting smart through the fall of this year, and beginning kind of outreach, engagement, and that kind of work of pulling all this analysis together in the winter of 2025, 2026, with recommendations coming forward for consideration and revision and polishing in the spring, with the idea of having any sort of implementation work happening in the summer of 2026. We also have a project management task, and that is to make sure that we stay on track. So that is a piece of it as well. So what are our next steps? In July of this year, we had planned to release an RFP that contains this scope for response. The idea is to start with a 45-day window for interested parties to respond to that RFP, and then review that in late August based on kind of what comes back, the approach the responses take, the qualifications of the staff who will work on the project, and of course the cost, and then bringing a selected consultant forward in September of 2025 for approval by council. So that was all a lot of information in a short amount of time, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Yes. Deputy City Manager Eubanks.
Thank you. Before Council hops into questions, I just want to raise a point for Mr. McNally. Something that I know you've given a lot of thought to, and I think it'd be helpful to opine, to hear your opinion about how it would proceed and Council's involvement in it, is the question of the ultimate goal. You mentioned the pillars between choice, stability, and quality. And I think that remains to some degree unanswered. And I believe that through your process, that is uncovered. If you could talk about how that'll happen a little bit for Council's information, please.
Yeah, so I think the start of this project is I think many members of council have heard anecdotal things about what's working with rent stabilization and things that might not be working so well with rent stabilization. And what the goal of this study is to go in is what's working well, what needs to be addressed or thought more about, and based on that, what are some solutions to this, with the idea of we are a city that is highly focused on stability. We know that there are trade-offs when you go too far in any pillar, in any direction towards the pillars. So what trade-offs can we make that still emphasize stability over, I think, the other 3 pillars, but still allow us to maybe find a balance that incorporates those other 2 pillars?
Thank you. Councilmember Dabala.
Yeah. Can you give a couple of examples of the things that that might get to be addressed that might potentially need to be fixed that we're hearing. Councilmember Honzak said some of that in her public comment earlier, but I'd like to hear you say that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with one of the things that gets talked about is reinvestment and housing quality. We are very vigorous in the city with policing our landlords to the property code. The property code does not mean that is a great quality housing unit. That means that it meets the code, the black and white code of the law. And so what we would like to do is provide an incentive or the ability for landlords to invest proactively in their property so that they aren't doing the HVAC upgrade when the system fails. They're doing it ahead of time. They're addressing appliances proactively. And so I think that's one thing that we hear often, which is, well, I'd love to do X, Y, and Z upgrade, but I'm squeezed budget wise, so I'll do it only when the city is going to drag me to court. We also have a few, underutilized properties. I'm thinking of a few on New Hampshire Avenue where we know that that property hasn't moved for a while, and we'd like these properties to contribute to the city. Obviously, housing is a critical piece of any good community, and if some of those could be turned into housing, that would be, I think, a big benefit for the city. So that's a couple of different things that we could look at as part of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Honzak.
I find the statistic very interesting. I was just sorry, I could have pulled it out just now, about how many of our units, our rent stabilized units, are small holders. And you know very well, and I said it tonight, that I have had small holders in particular come to me saying that it's they feel they should be put in a different category and they face unique challenges. And I'll be interested to see what your findings are. But given how many of our small holders of our rent stabilized units are small holders in the city, do you have any sense, or is it a difficult data point to gather to comprehend how many of those individuals live either in their buildings with their tenants, or whether they live in our city, and for example, how many other buildings they might hold in our city? I'm not asking you for that data right now, to be clear. I'm just curious if we even have that kind of data.
So we collect ownership information. That doesn't always immediately provide us with a clear example. Most properties are usually, especially if they're a commercial property, are held with a holding company. So the company really has one job, which is to hold that particular property. But there are ways that we can try to utilize the data we have to kind of get answers to those questions. And I think that would be one of the questions we'd want to answer.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I was unable to meet with you individually this week, but I did carefully study everything. So I hope I'm not asking any questions that would be easy for you to answer otherwise, or easy for me to figure out otherwise. I have some pretty big picture questions, just thinking about like the gravity of this endeavor we're undertaking. First off, because Mayor Searcy, you did emphasize earlier, this review was in a sense prompted by the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. And so within that plan, we have preserve strategies and we have produce strategies. And do you see this working as a preserve, to meet a preserve objective, or do you see this review as related to a produce objective?
So what I would say is
protect. I understand the protect objective. Yeah.
What I would say is that every policy hits on all three of those P's. Every policy has impacts on the production of housing, on the protection of existing renters, and the preservation of current housing. And that's just by nature, any policy you do is going to tilt some of the balance. Everything kind of is, for lack of a better word, connected. I think that rent stabilization at its core is a protection policy. It's there to protect against outrageous rent increases. And through that, it provides affordability. And that is a kind of, it's probably primary goal, but it does touch on pieces regarding the production of housing.
Okay, and within the production strategies do not mention taking any look at, from that strategic plan, they do not mention taking any look at our rent stabilization policies. I just want to make sure my colleagues understand that. But if we are then talking about, to some extent, and I appreciate all of the possible improvements and fixes that can be made in terms of preserve and protect goals. I'm thinking about the production, and Mayor Searcy, you spoke very eloquently about the desire for residents in rental housing to be able to transition into viable different units and still stay in town. Do we have, as a city, production targets for particular numbers of units, particular income level, price points, particular locations? Because if we don't, I'm wondering, how are we embarking on this study? How are we going to align whatever we're doing with this review with specific goals? Otherwise, how do we make sure, in other words, that for a renter who's trying to move into like something slightly more expensive, that some of that is produced if production is an outgrowth of this?
Yeah, so the Washington Metropolitan Council of Governments provides targets to jurisdictions. We get lumped in under Montgomery County as part of that. I will use the term housing needs assessment for the purposes of number crunching. So I'm happy to forward that kind of study along.
I've just never seen the numbers. We said we were going to align with regional goals for 2030, and I figured proportionally by now we would know what the number was, but I've never seen the exact numbers.
I think it's also hard to set a target when for years our baseline has been zero. So I think as part of the tax credits, we talked about 200 new units as a target. I'd love to hit 200 units. I think that that is something that would be great to do. But yeah.
Thank you, Director McNally. I do just want to chime in, given that Councilmember Schlegel quoted me. I think that it is really important for everyone to keep in mind that the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan noted a number of different strategies. And as Dr. Stacy explained to us during her presentation, there's no magic bullet. There's push and pull with any policy that relates to housing. One of the things that, as Councilmember Schlegel noted, that the prior council did was push towards its housing credits initiatives, right? So to try to create through tax incentives the additional resources or incentives to encourage investment in multifamily buildings that house individuals below certain levels of AMI, but also in terms of new housing creation. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that it's not one policy that is going to ultimately get our community and other communities in the situation that we're in nationally when it comes to housing affordability and the lack of housing. It's going to take an entire suite of policies working in tandem, pushing and pulling against one another to ensure that we ultimately end in a place where people have high quality housing that they can afford that is readily available. So I think it's really important. And the reason I interjected is because I think that there's sometimes a misnomer that rent stabilization laws are all that you need to fix everything. And it could be a hammer. But sometimes your need to correct a matter could potentially need a screwdriver. So you have to make sure that you have all of the tools in the toolbox and use them in a way to ultimately fix the issue that is at hand.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do just want to remind everyone that in the 25 to 26 council priorities, there is a specific goal to advance the city's housing goals to provide quality rental housing and increasing the development of new housing options. And so we are considering all of these, as the mayor said, as the director said, as a part of our strategy over time.
Thank you. And I hope I didn't come across as not understanding that these are very complexly interlocking issues and policies. My last question is just that in the presentation, it says that this would result in recommendations to be implemented by staff, but then verbally, Director McNally, you said recommendations to be implemented by the city. And if there's one point I want to make, that while I have great respect for the staff expertise and we could do nothing without all of the data collection, the management, the hard thinking that you do, this ultimately is such a crucial decision for the city that it can't be staff driven. We have to have these hard conversations, if they are going to be hard, up here. And so what exactly is in this scope is the outcome in terms of these recommendations? Where do they go from there? Do they go into our laps for us to decide what do we want to move on, or are we going to, are staff going to come forward with things after a few months for us to take a shot at?
Yeah. So the way this generally a policy document like this is done is the report is adopted by the council, which provides kind of a go forth and implement them. Some of them may be done administratively through administrative regulations. Some of them will require potentially code changes, in which case staff will, with the city attorney, draft an ordinance amending the city code and bring that forward for adoption by council. So it depends on what specific recommendation winds up there, but the idea would be that the report provides direction from council to staff, which staff will then implement through whatever the legal requirement is for that specific recommendation.
And just for others that perhaps are not as familiar, just want to make sure that people are clear. An example of this was the sustainability framework work that was done, where we had the Cadmus report, and it's available online, where the contractor came in, they did all of this work, they came up with a whole laundry list of recommendations. Staff then looked at all of those recommendations, came up with a framework or an approach for us to tackle it with some goals. Council then voted on the framework, right? And staff then began ticking away and implementing aspects of the framework that was voted on. So I can imagine this being in a similar vein, where the report comes in, we have an opportunity to weigh on the report, have an opportunity to weigh on the recommendations, have an opportunity to talk to staff about it. Staff then go back and figure out a framework in which we can kind of start executing. We would deliberate on that and vote on that, and then staff will then come back to us with the piecemeal items that would require a council vote.
Thank you, Mayor. And so it's not an up or down vote on a package. We look at the recommendations and we take our time to discuss them.
We take the opportunity to discuss the recommendations. Staff, of course, would take a look at the recommendations and put together what may be feasible. And maybe, again, we're speculating. We don't know what the recommendations are. There could be short-term, like immediate things that could happen. There could be longer-term items that we would need to put on the books. I think the only way that we're going to be able to know for sure is when we actually get those draft reports and kind of see what recommendations recommendations come forward. But I know that there is concern, and I can sense the concern that there's going to be this massive contractor-led, staff-led abolishment of everything that we hold dear in rent stabilization. And I just want to assure folks that that's not the intent as I see it. And that's not something that I'm encouraging this to have happen. But I do think that it is important to allow for the consultants, whomever they may be able to do the research, to convene the stakeholder meetings, to come up with some recommendations for council to consider. Council Member Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director McNally, for putting this together. And thank you for all the work that you do. And I've never had a chance to thank you publicly for all the work you did at 7520 Maple at the Duville. We appreciate you over there. My question is in regards to the fair return petition to increase the rent beyond the rent stabilization. You said that it would, the recommendation would be made by a third party. I'm just curious who that third party might be and whether or not council will have some say in those things.
Yeah, so that's our current process by which we process them. So we have a contract with a auditing firm, Clavis LLC, and so as part of the fair return, the property owner submits a petition, and that petition lays out a whole bunch of information, starting with kind of the revenue information, so that's the rent reports, as well as all their operating expenses and then capital expenses from the past few years, documented with receipts, sometimes even a Home Depot receipt, logs, that sort of stuff. And so we have extensive regulations about what counts, how it gets calculated, and so Clavis is the contractor, is the one who goes and does those calculations, and they generate a report which has a recommended increase. There's some limitations around the amount of the increase. So if the increase is going to be above 15%, we chunk it up so that there isn't more than a 15% increase in 1 year by our admin regs. And so we get maybe 1 or 2 of those a year. It costs anywhere between $4,000 and $8,000, depending on how tricky and complicated that audit is. And if you ask around, you will hear some landlords say that, yeah, I can do it, no problem. And you can hear other ones who will tell you their horror story, let's say, of it. I've had a few fun conversations with landlords who have, let's say, ended the call prematurely.
Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, are you looking for feedback on the actual scope of services of Exhibit A tonight, or do you want us to email them to you?
So if you have specific things tonight, we're very happy to hear them. As always, an email with specific points is very fine, would be very helpful in terms of collating comments. And what I'll say is we're planning to release this in July, so sooner rather than later would be preferred.
So we talked it earlier this week, but from the discussion tonight, there are 3 things you might look at. Since I learned in public comment that best practices in this arena are not like best practices in changing out energy efficient HVAC systems, where there really is a manual of best practice. Perhaps we can be talking instead about the way you put it in your presentation, jurisdictions that have well-working programs or something like that we can borrow from. That'd be one suggestion. Second suggestion, which I did make when we talked, is the data piece, the local data is important, and it winds up in different places, and it's also
it's attached to several things, different ones in different spots. Better maybe to pull it out and highlight it as a task. And last, to the point of the final report, maybe it could be a final report to the council, or a final report that lays out short, medium, and long-term recommendations, or something with a little more structure based on the conversation that we just had here. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Devala. Okay, Councilmember Hansa.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Lamon, go right ahead. I'm sorry, I cannot see hands.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was afraid that was the case. So I apologize if I butted in line in front of anybody.
No worries, go right ahead.
Two comment questions to consider in the drafting of this. You referred to comparable jurisdictions that you would be looking at in terms of size and that kind of thing. And I wanted to flag that in terms of comparability, could you also consider their comparability in terms of other factors that reflect Tacoma Park's values, and that would include diversity and the variety, the scope of variety of housing within those communities, because there are going to be some that have a rent stabilization program but fall on one or other side of that divide, but maybe are not comparable in the same way. And then here's another question about the scope of this study. Some things are obviously part of a rent stabilization program, and some things I would call rent stabilization adjacent. And those would be programs like tax programs like the one that was enacted by the former council that creates an incentivization for the construction of new multifamily housing. Others might be a city program to put money into a capitalization, availability of capitalization for people who have rent stabilized buildings and don't have a way to upfront afford to do the types of renovations that you were alluding to, like don't just fix the HVAC system one unit at a time, but do the whole building. Like programs that would enable us to strengthen one of the three legs of the stool, such as the stability leg, by coming up with adjacent projects and programs. And I wonder whether that is part of what you will be looking at in this study. Thank you.
So in terms of the comparability piece, absolutely, we can make sure that we're trying to draw from comparability on multiple different levels and when we pull together our comparison jurisdictions. In terms of complementary programs, we can try to put that in. One of the things that we're trying to do is wedge a lot of analysis and research into a scope, and I know $85,000 is a lot of money. It never goes far enough. But we can certainly see that we can try to incorporate some language that encourages, let's call it innovative complementary programs or something like that.
That does the trick. Thank you. I think that would be very helpful because there aren't going to be that many communities that have uniquely successful programs like we do. And maybe they've come up with additional ways to bolster their efforts to provide the type of housing opportunities that we do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Hanzak.
One thing that strikes me about the scope is I personally would find it very valuable to incorporate into this study something that's not just a sort of big picture data and landscape analysis, but also being able to put ourselves in the shoes of our existing, let me call them investors and or tenants, and really walking us through some of the decision matrices that they might be considering. For example, and I don't know if it's something you could make explicit, sort of like we would like to have realistic case scenarios built in as part of this, so that we can really begin to wrap our heads around what it looks like to sit in the shoes of, X investor who either, was comparing where they were going to put their dollars to Prince George's or to Tacoma Park, or or just across the street in Montgomery County, and therefore how they get to some of maybe the pain points that are elucidated with the data in your study. I just think that would really help bring the report to life for us in a way that will make it much more robust and meaningful, because I don't think it would just be anecdotal. I think these decisions are changing very, very rapidly right now, as we all know, and it's exactly that we need to really imagine, so we can see how those pain points work from a policy level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Yes, my thought was similar to Councilmember Honzak's, that recalling Dr. Stacy's presentation, it had limited value for me in seeing just numbers of, oh, this is the CPI that's applied in this city, it's just policy comparisons. And I really feel that case studies of a few localities where we could dig into those stories and see how when their policy went into place, how things fared over time, and how that interesting interplay between stability, amount of time people stayed in the community, as well as new housing coming in, how that all worked out, so that we could kind of have a good holistic and robust conversation about policy options.
Yeah, and I think I can answer both those questions, and kind of I'll try one answer for two questions. Let's see if it. I think that our look into the data, we would want to be able to kind of demonstrate, what is the on the ground impact. So not just summary statistics, but getting into kind of what does that look like for a landlord who is a owner manager, for lack of a better word, or what does that look like for someone who has a property portfolio, and how do we put numbers to tell that story. I think as part of telling that story, one of the questions, and we hope to get really robust responses to this RFP that address kind of the scope of services, is kind of, this is what we generally are looking for, and what we usually receive is something that takes that as the guiding kind of principles, and then says, here's where we think, as the consultants who are the experts, maybe you need to do that. And so we say for jurisdictions in this, it might be that, we're going to do, we recommend 2 case studies, and we dive in on 2 jurisdictions and really tell the story there as a better way to elucidate potential answers. And so I think that one of the things that I think is worth highlighting is that this scope is how we are starting the conversation with potential consultants, and also where are we starting as a city as we move through this process. And that, as we come back, you might see this scope be slightly different when the consultant brings it back, because they will have thought about it, spent some time in their response to it, saying, this is our approach, and this is why we think that this approach makes sense. So.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Director McNally, and your team for all of the work. I know that we've put you all to work tonight with all of the presentations, and we really appreciate you all being so open to sit down with each of us to address questions and to address feedback that you've received. So definitely look forward to this item. I believe this item, just trying to make sure when it will come back. I think the release of the request for proposals will be in July, you mentioned.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay. Well, seeing no more lights, thank you very much. And with that, I will move for us to adjourn for this evening. All right. Thanks. Everybody have a great night.